to say thank you to each and every one of you for coming out today. We're very pleased to be able to welcome all of our friends, our old and new friends, to be with us today. It's an honor to be graced by your presence. Today we are here to report on the Enitan Stories project called Identifying Labor Traffic Victims in Minnesota. It was made possible by the Bush Foundation's Innovation Grant. This was a 3-year grant, started in 2020, and we know about that time what was going on, right? The pandemic. What a time to get started. But we forged ahead anyways and did a lot of great work. We got it done. We're really pleased with the outcomes and results, and we're really happy for this opportunity to share the results with you today. In addition to the grants report, today's event will also include separate remarks. We'll have 2 panel discussions and a recommendation from the grant report as well. Last but not least, we are also celebrating today. We're celebrating 10 years of the Enitan Story. 10 years. It went really fast. They say time flies when you're having fun. Time also flies when you're doing some really hard, good work. And we're really excited for this journey and where how far we've come. I hope you take this time today to meet other people. Maybe you've not met before. Take the time to get to meet other people. Network with people you've already met. A lot is coming up, especially for those who have their new program year starting in July here. I'm sure you can learn a lot about what's going on and engage with everyone, with each other. We also want to say welcome to people online. We are also on Zoom Live, and so we want to welcome you as well. So to get started and keep things off, let's welcome our Executive Director, Bukola Oriola.
Thank you, Rita. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And good morning, online people. So I would like to say thank you this morning. The federal agencies present online, I'm not sure there's any federal agency in the room here, but we have those online. Thank you for coming. And state agencies online and in the room, our partners, our colleagues, especially my fellow subject matter experts colleagues in the room and online, and other stakeholders. I am grateful to God for the opportunity to be here today, and delighted and honored to welcome you to the Enitan Stories Labor Trafficking Convening, today Thursday, May 18, 2023. I would like to thank the board members of the Enitan Story for helping the organization to fulfill its mission of advocating for victims and empowering survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence for 10 years, because I won't be here today without their support. I'm just a poster child. They're the ones who do the hard work behind the scene. Thank you also to all of our in-person attendees, vendors, speakers, and online attendees. I would like to also thank the Office for Victims of Crime and the Department of State Trafficking in Persons Office for their support of survival leadership. It is the first ever multidisciplinary training hosted by the Enitan Story since it's been in existence for 10 years. This event was made possible with the help of our partners, the subject matter experts with lived experience, Minnesota state agencies, community organizations, and other people around the community. And one of those people in the room I would like to mention today is Becky Booker. of the fire department, thank you so much because she made it possible for us to use this space at no cost. I would also like to thank the Bush Foundation that awarded us this grant in the middle of the pandemic. You know, trusting a survival-led organization. And I will say on behalf of the board of the Enitan Story, I would like to say a very big thank you to the Bush Foundation for believing in a small and survival-led organization to undertake such an enormous task. I didn't know what I was getting into when we started, but I'm very grateful. We wouldn't have been able to achieve this feat without the help and support of our work group members. So our work group members, the subject matter expert work group members, and the service providers and subject matter experts, and also the state agencies work group members. Thank you so much for all your support, your encouragement, and effort to get all the required resources. That has been very helpful to getting us to this point today. This is not just the success of an organization, but the success of a collective community. The Enitan Story was founded 10 years ago to meet the dear needs of those who have experienced labor trafficking or sex trafficking and domestic violence. We quickly learned the challenge of meeting the needs of those who have experienced labor trafficking due to limited or lack of resources. The state of Minnesota has spent $0 on labor trafficking while spending millions on sex trafficking to provide comprehensive services to victims and survivors. We are hopeful that this will change soon, especially at the end of the current legislative session, as we hope that our state will provide the needed funding to provide trauma-informed comprehensive services to individuals who have experienced labor trafficking and labor exploitation. While we have funding to increase awareness on labor trafficking, we couldn't spend any grant money on lobbying, and our efforts were limited to educating our legislators. However, we are very grateful to the Carpenters Union that came through to spend volunteer hours to help our legislators make a statewide change to provide funds to serve victims and survivors of labor trafficking. On behalf of the leadership of the Enitan Story and staff, I would like to say a very big thank you to you, Carl Macarius and Ryan Gilbertson from the Carpenters Union. Meanwhile, I would also like to encourage my subject matter experts with lived experience colleagues in the room and online. You are the light and the right key to a locked door by filling the gap that no one else in the anti-trafficking movement can fill, except you. I urge you to keep going no matter how tough it may be. In the past 10 years, I have cried, I have laughed and prayed. I am grateful for how God has brought me and the organization. You can cry. It's okay to laugh, and it's okay to pray. However, you will be able to do your best and be rest assured that your efforts will not be in vain. Once again, thank you to our work group members comprising of subject matter experts with lived experience and state agencies. Honorable Ronnie Madi, Honorable Bella Honoke, Honorable Harold D'Souza, Honorable Evelyn Chumbo, Honorable Flor Molina, Honorable Phineas Lipenga, Honorable Evelyn Chumbo, Honorable Imam Matu, Caroline Palmer, Safe Harbor Director, Minnesota Department of Health, Amanda Cobro, Safe Harbor Expansion Coordinator, Minnesota Department of Health, and Darian McCormick, Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services, Sarah Ladd, Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services, Jonathan Moller, Minnesota Attorney General's Office, Agent Bobby Joe Hastanik, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Predatory Crime Section, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Dr. Tolulope Ola, Executive Director, Restoration for All, Incorporated, Rachel Hare, Immigration Services Attorney, International Institute of Minnesota, Laurie Anderson, Executive Director, Transformative Circle, Sunu Shrestha, Senior Advisor, Human Trafficking and Exploitation Prevention Initiative, City of Minneapolis, Sarah Floman, Public Policy Manager, Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Steve Dobrovolny, Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. And I would like to add one more person to that list. Her name is Alisa Santosi. And I will also use this to encourage those of you in the room who want to work with survivors as subject matter experts or help survivors to build capacity. After 5 years of having no funding to do anything, Alisa was the one that worked with me and helped us to write our first grant to the Minnesota Department of Health, which is an OVC grant. And also through that process, she trained me and also worked with me to get the Bush Foundation grant that brought us all in the room today. So sometimes when we talk about survivor engagement and survivor empowerment, it's more than just handing us money for the service. Sometimes the money we need is to build capacity, is to help us build skills to improve. If it is not for Alisa, I won't be here today in front of you, and we won't be doing all this work that is changing our state positively. So I would like to say a very big thank you. And on a side note, I always say that Alisa is my mom that came back to me. So thank you so much, Alisa. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Bukola. As a board member, I'm witness to the work that Bukola does. I tell her all the time, at my 9-to-5 job, if I was working as hard as she was, that's like 3 people job. So we really appreciate you and all you've done to bring us this far, Bukola. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a video remarks by the Director, Office of Victims of Crime, or OVC, Ms. Kristina Rose.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this convening focused on labor trafficking. I wish I could be with you all in person today, but I am grateful that you're accepting these recorded remarks. I first met Bukola many years ago when I was a deputy director overseeing the human trafficking work at the Office for Victims of Crime. She has taught me so much about the importance of survivor leadership and survivor-led initiatives in anti-trafficking work. Bukola is someone that you never forget, and she is a gift to the work that we do. Thank you, Bukola. The Office for Victims of Crime is the largest federal funder of anti-trafficking programming in the United States. In fact, earlier this year, we celebrated 20 years of OVC's anti-trafficking efforts. OVC started with a $10 million congressional appropriation and funded 12 programs under the Services for Trafficking Victims Discretionary Grant Program. Today, all of the Office of Justice programs, law enforcement, juvenile justice, and victim services human trafficking initiatives are housed within OVC. And we've gone from $10 million in 2003 to this year awarding over $90 million in grant funding. Over the past 2 decades, we have worked with our grantees across the nation to provide services to a record number of victims and survivors of human trafficking. Currently, we oversee almost 500 active anti-trafficking awards, representing over $300 million. Our mission is to ensure that all victims receive the services needed to rebuild their lives. I am proud to say that labor trafficking has been a central focus in our response to human trafficking from the very beginning. Our funding has supported services to labor trafficking survivors across the country for investigations and prosecutions, as well as research on forced labor through our partnership with the National Institute of Justice. However, as you all know too well, there is still a scarcity of research related to this form of human trafficking, and there is a tremendous lack of public awareness and knowledge of workers' rights. Too often, service providers, law enforcement, and other professionals encounter labor trafficking victims and survivors, but don't know how to identify them. And when they do, there seems to be very little that can be done in terms of resources. OVC is committed to increasing identification and expanding access to services and justice for victims of labor trafficking. This year, OVC's anti-trafficking funding opportunities include language to emphasize that applicants should propose meaningful responses to labor trafficking victims in their grant applications. Now, I know this is going to be a new endeavor for some organizations, but we will meet grantees where they are through investments in research, training and technical assistance, and comprehensive wraparound services for victims of human trafficking. This renewed focus will help ensure that more labor trafficking victims can access the full range of trauma-informed and victim-centered services that they need, both in the aftermath of crime, the immediate aftermath, and over the long term as they work toward healing and recovery. To help grantees enhance their response to labor trafficking, OVC has invested in specialized training and technical assistance. One such resource is Framework, an OVC-funded platform for labor trafficking survivors and other experts to help service providers and their community partners identify and serve survivors of trafficking. I encourage you to explore its user-friendly archive of resources online. OVC has also produced interactive child victim and witness support materials for children and youth impacted by human trafficking. These incredible short graphic novels, which are available on our website, ovc.gov, focus on young sex and labor trafficking survivors' experiences. There are accompanying booklets that focus on victims' rights and the roles as they interact with the justice system. Translations and audiobooks that are read by voice actors who are actually young adult trafficking survivors accompany the materials. They are simply brilliant. So Minnesota is often a trailblazer when it comes to innovation in victim services, and your response to labor trafficking is no different. It's my understanding that the child labor screening tool and guidelines developed by the Minnesota Department of Health and Human Services is being used as a blueprint by other states looking to increase their understanding of how to identify young victims of labor trafficking. We at OVC applaud your work, your innovation, and your leadership. Finally, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to all of you on behalf of OVC for your dedication and your service to victims and survivors of human trafficking. Every day, you are changing people's lives and you are giving them hope for the future. Thank you for that. And I hope you have a wonderful meeting.
We want to say thank you to OVC and Ms. Kristina Rose for her remarks. We really appreciate the partnership we've had with OVC and hopefully a continued partnership in the future here. Next on the agenda, we have remarks by the Department of State Trafficking in Persons Office, or TIP. And we have Ms. Tegan here joining us virtually. So we'll listen to her remarks.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to speak with you all today. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Tegan Hare, and I'm the team lead for survivor engagement in the Department of State's Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, also known as the TIP Office. The TIP Office leads the department's global efforts to combat human trafficking through the prosecution of traffickers, detection of victims and prevention of human trafficking. Our office is responsible for bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, targeted foreign assistance, and public engagement. We partner with foreign governments, international organizations, federal agencies, civil society, private sector, and survivors to develop and implement effective strategies to confront human trafficking. The TIP office may best be known for the State Department's annual Trafficking Enforcement Report, also known as the TIP report. This report is our primary diplomatic and diagnostic tool used to guide our bilateral and multilateral relations with foreign government and to encourage action to combat human trafficking. The report evaluates efforts of 188 governments around the world, including the United States, to combat human trafficking based on minimum standards as set forth in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Another aspect of the TIP report is that we use the introduction of the report to highlight an important theme each year. Last year's report, introduction, focused on the importance of meaningful survivor engagement. The goal was to advance the importance of engaging survivors through trauma-informed approaches that promote transparency, trust, equity, inclusivity, and commitment to collaboration. It served to promote the importance of survivor inclusion in the development of policies, programs, or initiatives. This is key for all anti-trafficking stakeholders. I'll talk shortly about the importance of incorporating survivor expertise and elevating survivor leadership. But first, I'd like to highlight the magnitude and prevalence of forced labor, both internationally and within the United States. Last fall, the International Labor Organization, known as the ILO, also along with the International Organization for Migration and the Law Free Foundation, released new estimates that at any given time in 2021, approximately 27.6 million individuals were in forced labor. This estimate generally reflects what the U.S. government considers to be human trafficking. The ILO found that forced labor has grown in recent years. No region of the world is spared, and for most forced labor occurs in the private economy. These findings confirm what our office has been seeing from our work over the years, that forced labor is prevalent throughout the global supply chains. We have increased our focus on preventing forced labor in government public procurement. The United States government spends over $650 billion a year in goods and services. This translates to tremendous leverage and ability to prevent forced labor in global supply chains. We are working to enhance implementation of a federal acquisition regulation on combating trafficking in persons, strengthening training of our acquisitions personnel, and working to enhance risk mapping of high-risk, high-volume State Department contracts. From drafting sections of the annual TIP report to advising policies on grant making to delivering training on trauma-informed approaches, survivors and experts with lived experience of human trafficking play a vital role in the work at the TIP office. Survivors of human trafficking are integral to combating this crime, and their perspective and experience should be taken into consideration to better address this crime at every level. Engaging survivors as partners is critical to establishing an effective, victim-centered, and trauma-informed, culturally competent policy and strategies that address prevention, protection, and prosecution efforts. For our survivor engagement to be meaningful, we are continually assessing and improving how we integrate and promote survivor leadership in our anti-trafficking efforts, whether that's through foreign assistance priorities, our bilateral and multilateral engagement, or interagency coordination efforts. In line with the National Action Plan to combat human trafficking, the Department of State prioritizes the incorporation of trauma-informed and survivor-informed approaches into our work. We primarily do this through our engagement with the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, as well as the State Department's Human Trafficking Expert Consultant Network, which we also call the network for short. This includes individuals with lived experience of human trafficking and other subject matter experts. We've had the pleasure of collaborating with the executive director of Enitan Story, Honorable Bukola Oriola, on both these platforms. Honorable Bukola is one of our network consultants and someone who I have come to know personally and also share the sentiments that were earlier expressed of how wonderful and informative she has been. She's given us critical insights from a survivor perspective by evaluating the quality of grantee proposal and informing new global investments. We are excited to see that now more than ever, stakeholders are incorporating survivor expertise and input in all stages in the development and implementation of anti-trafficking efforts. As this work continues, I'd like to leave you with just a couple of foundational but very important lessons that we have learned and considerations of engaging with survivor leaders. One is, do not engage survivors solely to tell their story and their trafficking experience, and never share a survivor's story without their permission. Include survivors in decision-making and address barriers to survivor inclusion and leadership. And last but not certainly least, always compensate survivors for their time, expertise, and contribution in a timely manner, whether they are participating in a focus group or providing you consultant services. Thank you for allowing me to share with you today, and I look forward to joining and learning from this exciting event.
I want to thank Tegan Hare from the Department of State Trafficking in person, Tegan, for joining us virtually and for those remarks. We appreciate our partnership with TIP office. Next on the agenda, we will hear from our board chair of the Enitan Story, Ms. Yvette Toko. Okay. All right. Well, is that better? Yes. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. I am Yvette Toko, the board chair, and also novice tech person over here. All right, I'm trying. All right, so I want to say a few things briefly, and I have them on my phone, and the font is very small. All right, so as you can see, All right, so here we go. I want to, first off, start by saying a big thank you to our volunteers, staff, funders, government organizations, private individual donors, past board members, and of course, the existing board members. We are a small organization with limited resources as compared to the larger organizations providing direct services to those who have experienced labor and sex trafficking, as well as domestic violence. Yet, we do our best with the resources that we have. All right, it's not my day here, but we're going to continue. I'm a teacher, by the way, so let me just get into my teacher voice. All right, so I want to talk about the bag of hope, this beautiful bag of hope that you noticed when you walked in. This bag of hope was gifted to the Enitan Story by one of our clients. So let me say a little bit about this. The story behind the bag of hope is one that the Enitan Story client, who was so grateful to share with us. This client had a hopeless situation and turned to the Enitan Story, which became a success story for this client.
The client received services from the Enitan Story, having never met Ms. Bukola, Oriola, the executive director of the organization, nor any staff members. To appreciate Ms. Oriola, this bag was presented to Ms. Oriola as a gift in 2019. Ms. Bukola decided that this would be a bag that carries a lot of messages and therefore would not wear it, but rather present it to the Enitan Story as the bag of hope for every client who will pass through this organization, giving them hope, regardless of how hopeless the situation is or might be. So I want to read a poem. The poem is titled The Bag of Hope, written by none other Ms. Bukola Oriola. Though it may be filled with fears, it brings strength. Though it may be filled with cries, it brings joy. Though it may be filled with despair, it brings hope. The bag of hope. Though it may be filled with uncertainty, it brings fulfillment. Though it may be filled with weakness, it brings strength. Though it may be filled with agony, it brings comfort. Though it may be filled with unkindness, it brings justice. Though it may be filled with shame, it brings dignity. The bag of hope, it turns victims into advocates of hope. Isn't that beautiful? All right, and I am almost finished here. I would like to honor one of our board members. I just can't say former yet. Pastor Lindy Zabel. Pastor Lindy served the Enitan Story for 10 years on the board and recently retired. And so we want to present him with, his parting gifts, I would say, or his gifts of service. And you will see one of them on the table there. Also, I would like to honor someone in the room, Peter Motololi. He is our Hubert Humphrey International Fellow. Thank you very much for being here. And receive your wonderful certificate. Thank you. All right, thank you. And then, last but not least, we have time. Now it's time for us to view a 20-minute video, a short video, showcasing some of the wonderful things going on at the Enitan Story. Thank you.
The Enitan Story started about 10 years ago as a result of the need to fill the gap in the system when it comes to providing services to those who have experienced human trafficking. And when we say human trafficking, in our context, we mean both sex and labor trafficking. We are a survival-led organization, and we think about the human beings who have experienced crime. So sometimes we may have someone who is experiencing domestic violence and sex trafficking, or domestic violence and labor trafficking. We provide services to those. And sometimes we have someone who is only experiencing domestic violence, and we provide services to those too. And the way we provide services is through referrals to be able to get comprehensive service for the individual.
My name is Rita Apaloo. I have been on the board of directors of the Enitan Story for the past 10 years. It has been an honor to be part of this work and in helping to build the organization. It all started with just one person's story of survivor, overcoming the ordeal of domestic abuse and human trafficking. Then that story was shared to educate people, create awareness, provide a safe space for people to have open and honest conversations, and ultimately to provide the opportunity to do something about it. For the past 10 years, the Anytime Story has been trailblazing this work despite having limited funding. However, we have found great collaborators along the way. Thanks to our partners and funders for working with us to provide opportunities and services to meet the needs of individuals that we serve. Together, we can work towards building a future without abuse or human trafficking. Let's celebrate 10 years and work together to sustain the Anytime Story because there's much more work to be done.
We do case management. We meet with clients at least once a week. So we have a weekly support group where all our clients are encouraged to come to hang out on Friday night. And that was how we came about what we call gratitude support activity. Our support group is now focused on each person telling their victimization story with the hope of encouraging another individual in the room. Instead, it's more focused on you now, today, how you are feeling, what you are grateful for, to kind of help move your mind from the worry of, I don't know what's going to happen with my case, because sometimes for individuals, their case can take years. We've had clients we've worked with that it took 4 years, for example, for them to get immigration relief. And there are other clients that will take longer than that. During that time that people are waiting for immigration relief, for example, for those who are not US citizens, it can be a very challenging period. It's also a period that somebody can be re-exploited and re-victimized. It's also a time that it's so easy for somebody to be lured into another kind of crime. When you have someone who is a victim and then all of a sudden they commit a crime, unfortunately, the system will not see the victimization. It will be focusing on the crime. Sometimes that can be very, very challenging for our clients. So we try to use group to keep them focused on the current thing going on. And we have realized that group also help us to identify immediate need of the client. Sometimes we have clients who are in deep depression, but we may not know until we are in group where we're asking basic questions like, what are you grateful for today? Have you eaten today? Because sometimes we may not even think about food as big thing, but for someone who has experienced trauma, food is a big thing. We've found situations where somebody is not eating for days, but luckily they are coming to group and we're able to do follow-up and finding out, oh, they need to meet with a therapist. Sometimes our client needs housing, and housing is one of the big issues because the housing programs also have limitations. There is the limitations for those who are not citizens or do not have residency, and sometimes it's not that they don't have citizenship, it's that they're not within the age limit that can get housing. So that puts somebody in another kind of box that is very challenging. We also do what we call monthly check-in, which is one-on-one with individual clients. And that's when we talk about their case, what help they need, or whether we still have to keep waiting and encouraging them. During the one-on-one, we work with them to create goals. They have the short-term goals and then the long-term goals. It's amazing how people are really meeting those goals and achieving those goals. And one of those goals achieved is this book. This is a book published by one of our clients. One of our goals was to become a published author, and she published a children's book. We track the goals that they've accomplished because also it's helped us to show them the progress they have made. Sometimes if you have goals and those goals are not written, they're just in your head and you achieve them, it's hard to do the mental inventory and really see. We do take notes when we do the check-in with them, and we share those notes with them to say, okay, this is your own copy, to keep seeing what you need to work on. And sometimes part of the goals is what we have to work on too. It's two-way street. They have their responsibilities, we have our own responsibilities, and sometimes while we're brainstorming together with the client, some of those responsibilities will fall on the Enitan Story. For us as a survival-led organization, success is when the individual is able to move on with their life and create their own reality. Our role in that process is to be the support and help wherever we can. But what they want has to come from them, and we work with them to make that a reality for them. We also have a youth group we call TESIEC. It's called the Enitan Story Youth Empowerment Circle. It's focused on those who are age 24 and below. And that one, basically, we meet every month too, where we ask what they want. So what they want could be education, could be scholarships, could be jobs. So we use that opportunity to find those stuff for them. We also use it as an opportunity to talk about safe relationships and how to prevent re-exploitation of someone who had already been exploited, because it's so easy for someone who has experienced trafficking, either sex or labor trafficking, to be re-exploited. So we use that group to help our clients to avoid that and also provide the resources, specific resources that they are needing to them.
Hello, my name is Yvette Toko. I am the board chair for the Enitan Story. I've been with the Enitan Story for nearly 10 years. One of the things that I wish to highlight is the GSA support group. I've attended the support group on numerous occasions and witnessed survivors talk about two things they've benefited from. The first one is the mental health support from attending groups and coming together and just being able to be with one another with a shared common understanding and a shared experience. The second one is the financial support that survivors receive. This support helps survivors pay their cell phone bills and pay other bills, and also be able to buy food. So I would like to thank our stakeholders for supporting the Enitan Story.
We do a lot of education, training. In fact, thanks to one of our founders, Headwaters Foundation, we developed this training with 3 clinics, a professor, and 3, we call them subject matter experts. Subject matter experts in our context are those who have experienced trafficking, but now they are using that experience as experts to inform the work, because we believe that for us to really create a solution, the people who are directly impacted have to be part of that solution process. And having the subject matter expert help us develop this training has been very, very impactful, because we've trained 3 clinics there, and now under the Bush grant, we're training additional clinics. But when Enitan Story started, for the first 5 years, we didn't have grants. The funding we had were donations from individuals. But since 5 years ago, we've been getting grants, and our first grant came through the Minnesota Department of Health, which is an OVC grant. OVC is the Office for Victims of Crime. And on that project, we were working specifically to do outreach on labor trafficking. So we were training professionals who are more than likely to come in contact with those who have experienced labor trafficking, because even those who serve domestic violence victims and those who serve sex trafficking victims, those individuals who have experienced those crimes could be experiencing those crimes alongside labor trafficking. So teaching them how to recognize it when folks are coming through has been impactful, because right now labor trafficking is becoming more popular for people to learn about among service providers and professionals across the state. And during the implementation of that project with the OVC grant, we were able to train more than 100 professionals, and we did outreach to a lot of households and through the media, social media, online, and also traditional media. We were able to reach about or over 10,000 households in Minnesota. The Bush grant is how we got here now. We are still training professionals, but we took it a step further by also training our lawmakers. And in fact, Peter here, that was how we got connected to Peter, because he's a police officer from Lesotho. In the state of Minnesota, there has been funding for sex trafficking, but no funding for labor trafficking. Even there are funding for domestic violence, but no funding for labor trafficking. So training our lawmakers help them to realize that labor trafficking is happening also in Minnesota, and the fact that they passed a wage theft act in 2019 also helped to be uncovering some labor trafficking when investigators are going out to identify or investigate wage theft. So now we are hopeful that there will be funding available for those who have experienced labor trafficking in Minnesota to be able to get comprehensive services, trauma-informed services through case management, housing, and legal services in the state of Minnesota. Before the Enitan story, there was a book that was actually the beginning of how this whole thing started. And that book, Imprisoned, The Traverse of a Traffic Victim, was what I did first to bring attention to the issue of human trafficking. And in my case, it was labor trafficking. My goal was for everybody possible to know, and for those who are still in captivity to be able to get help to come out. So I went to the local TV station called Public Access TV in Blaine. I did a class on movie or how to produce your own show. During the class, my classmates decided they would join me to produce Imprisoned show from the book. Although we're a very tiny organization, right now we're an organization of 2 staff. And we have a professional fellow also working with us right now. That their time is short, so they will be leaving us soon. But we are grateful for all the hands that has been helping us to be able to get to where we are today.
So I came into this country on a different note altogether: victim identification, mobilization, sensitization, and advocacy programs, victim rehabilitation, victim handling, and offender handling. So we don't have really much on offender handling. I think we can do that as the police. But there's a vacuum between victims and perpetrators. So the key issue that I think I have learned so far with the Enitan story, which came as a bonus anyway, because I was looking for rehabilitation, but I didn't know what exactly goes into the rehabilitation. That's what I call a bonus, because since I came into the Enitan story, I realized that at some point we must have convicted the victims, because we first look at them as perpetrators than victims of trafficking. So I think I've gained a really good insight in terms of their approach, in terms of their policy, in terms of handling, in terms of dealing with the victims. How do you connect with the victim for the first time as a cop? Taking in mind the trajectory of the police training, of the law enforcement. I mean, we are not trained to be therapists, and our approach to any crime, most notably, is force. But with reference to my own country, and of course in the US, I was very lucky to observe the movement around the airports, the ports of entry, That's where we have a lot of trafficking. And that's where I think both my country and the US, the law enforcement need to a little bit work on that in terms of identification, in terms of handling. So I'm really happy because I've seen that the BCA is on the process of recruiting a therapist. Whether we like it or not, we are not experts in that field. We may try to fill the lacuna, but we always need agencies like the Enitan, people who know. Now I know I'll have subject matter experts in my country. Now I know that there are some policies within the what they call the survivors that we can implement. So I have developed some sort of keen interest around that area, and then I might be working on a publication in 2 weeks' time around the survivors, looking at some of the policies that were imposed, some of the recommendations around the survivors in Minneapolis, included the lifting of what they call it, the conviction, how they get employed, how they get integrated into the system, how they are not seen as criminals so that they are absorbed within the city of Minneapolis system. I mean, I can take everywhere, but this is in short what I can say.
Well, for me, it has been a really good experience. I joined the Enitan Story 3 months ago, and the most important part for me is to see how making a difference in people's life and how the Enitan Story helped them rebuild their life and regain their freedom. We just don't help the person but their family too. Giving them their power back is just really inspiring to me, because that really helped me too. Like it gives me power too. So I really like that part. Also, the community around this anti-trafficking movement, just to know all the people that have this passion and how they advocate for this matter is amazing.
Celebration times! Congratulations to the Enitan Stories and its founder, Honorable Bukola Oriola, on those 10 years anniversary. It's been 10 years of a lot of work, hard work. I know the tears, the struggle, the frustrations, laughs that you've been through all these years. I've seen also with the passion and the dedication that you put toward to serving victims and survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. There's a lot of stories to tell from all those individuals that have been benefits from your program, from your organization, from the love and caring that you put out there. Thank you so much, Bukola. And I'm pretty sure you have been impacting so many families and so many people. You are an inspiration. So, Bukola, you are the Enitan Story. Thank you so much. God bless you, and more years to come ahead of success.
again, Enitan Toko, our board chair for the Enitan Story, and wow, what a very impactful video of the last 10 years and what the Enitan Story is about. We also want to recognize the author of the video, the person who did the video. She's in the room and continuing to work with us, and she's been working with Enitan Story in a lot of different ways since its start. And so Laura Sargent, thank you so much for all that you do for us. Next on the agenda, we will have a report of the Bush grant. And we have the project coordinator from the Enitan Story, Osmara Gomez Carnella. Osmara started just 3 months ago. So she's pretty new, but she has been so amazing. We're really lucky to have her. She's the project coordinator and all other duties as assigned. So we are really, really grateful, and Osmara, welcome.
Hello, you can, well, I'm gonna, hope you guys can hear me. Okay. Nice to meet you all. I'm so happy to meet some of you. My name is Osmara Gomez Carnella. As Rita said, I'm the project coordinator of the Enitan Story, and I'm going to talk to you about the project Bush Community Innovation Grant, identifying labor traffic victims in Minnesota. So this project started 3 years ago during the pandemic in 2020, and despite the pandemic, the Enitan Story has been able to advance the knowledge and maintain collaborations with existing and new partners, implementing project activities that increase the knowledge of the stakeholders, people with lived experience, the general public, service providers, law enforcement, lawmakers, and funders. What's the goal of this project? The goal is to facilitate the expansion of the Minnesota Safe Harbor law to include labor trafficking by building upon existing work in the area of labor trafficking. The main purpose is to raise Minnesota's consciousness of labor trafficking to the same level as their consciousness on sex trafficking. Okay, there are 3 elements of the community innovation that were key during this process. The first one, inclusive, collaborative, and resourceful. The Enitan Story has made sure to include key players such as service providers, state agencies, people with lived experience of labor trafficking, and stakeholders through community conversations and surveys to ensure that we develop and implement a project that is successful in helping Minnesotans identify labor trafficking. So through these collaborations, the Enitan Story has identified at least 6 victims of labor trafficking within and outside the Safe Harbor network, who would otherwise not be identified because the provider didn't know what to look for. So the Enitan Story outreach and training helped some of the providers and new partners to identify the victims and connect them to appropriate service. Only of these 3 victims could be served with available funding due to age restrictions of being 24 years old or younger. So this project consists of 2 work groups. The first one is subject matter work group, and the second one is provider work group. These work groups have meeting every 5 to 6 months to expand Safe Harbor to include labor trafficking services. As I said, the first one is made of providers, and the second one is comprised of subject matter experts with lived experience. The purpose of these work groups is to provide guidance, feedback, and connection to elevate the issue of labor trafficking in Minnesota. The Minnesota Department of Health and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, along with other stakeholders, provide technical assistance and guidance as we navigate the Capitol to reach legislators and educate them on labor trafficking. The subject matter experts with lived experience have contributed immensely using survivor lens to provide solutions. As a result, the Enitan Story increased the number of subject matter experts from 6 to 9. Okay. This project has helped the Enitan Story to build equity through a survivor-led approach beyond just a survivor-informed approach. The subject matter experts with lived experience were compensated equally with the non-profit organizations. Also, the subject matter expert led the project alongside the executive director of the Enitan Story, Bukola, while the work group members that comprise state agency and staff, the state agency staff and non-profit staff were respectful of their ideas, suggestions, and feedback through the implementation process. MDH staff presented at an International Human Trafficking Summit with the Enitan Story Executive Director on how to implement successful projects and inform policy change through the lens of those with lived experiences as leaders on the project. So, the Enitan Story conducted labor trafficking training to various professionals across the state of Minnesota and beyond. At least 830 professionals were trained, among them Minnesota Safe Harbor regional navigators, social service providers, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, immigrant and refugee services providers have received training through conference and staff meetings. Also, the Enitan Story received a commitment from 3 clinics. The first one is Clinic 555 in St. Paul. The second one is Broadway Health Clinic Minneapolis. And the third one that is still pending is Minneapolis Health Clinic training. Oh, the training is pending. So they're going to receive the literature this June and they're going to get the training by June. The law enforcement training. The Enitan Story participated in the project by providing lived experience expertise to statewide policy officers on how to identify labor trafficking. The Enitan Story delivered the training to law enforcement across the state through the law enforcement protocol developed by the PCA and the Advocates for Human Rights. Yes, the Office for Victims of Crime. The policies development. The Enitan Story earmarked a portion of the project time to develop a survivor-informed, engaged policy and an employee handbook to ensure that we're working towards zero labor trafficking. The Enitan Story hopes that this policy will also help guide our subcontractors in ensuring that they are taking measures to combat labor trafficking. Another part of this project is the community conversations. Through the Bush Grant, the Enitan Story facilitates 3 community conversations that were vital for the Enitan Story to identify labor trafficking survivors and connect them to the services they need. The Enitan Story hosted 3 online events via Zoom, hosted by Transformative Circle, Restoration for All, and Planting People Growing Justice. At least 138 people participated in the online community conversations, while about 200 people were reached during the tablet events. The Enitan Story met with more than 30 organizations and the Safe Harbor Network. Also, the Enitan Story educated at least 356 families in Minnesota through distributing flyers and providing information about the services the Enitan Story provides. And here are the survey that the Enitan Story put aside in the community conversations. The first graphic is, have you heard or learned about labor trafficking? And as you can see, 64.7% say yes, while 35.3% says no. And some of the responses captured for the question, what can the state of Minnesota do to help identify and provide services to victims and survivors of labor trafficking? And the answers fell into 3 main categories. The first one is educating, funding, and prosecution. So let's see what the people respond to this. Regarding education, some answers were educate them, more social media ads, outreach, screening at all levels, educate people about labor trafficking, and public gathering. Regarding funding, fund organizations that are already doing this work by helping them rehabilitate after their experience of labor trafficking. And the last one is Minnesota can have a set-aside pool of money for victims and survivors, additionally with facilities to help these people. The last one is prosecution and the people respond. High penalty for labor and sex traffickers by putting in place strict rules and measures to people who engage in labor trafficking. And this is another graphic, and here you can see the field of work of the people who responded survey. 36% are service providers. We have law enforcement, medical professionals, students also. And the last graphic, have you had contact with any victim of labor trafficking? 49.4% say no, 24.7% says maybe, and only 25.8% say yes. Also, this is applied for educated Minnesota lawmakers, and here it says the fields that you can find labor trafficking. So one of them are hotels, home health, construction, manufacturing, homes, housekeeping, massage, and hair and nail salons, and some others that you can see over there. So, educating the public. The Enitan Story is here to help. Labor trafficking is misunderstood and under-identified. The Enitan Story is a labor trafficking survivor-led organization that can educate your community, agency, or organization in recognizing signs of labor trafficking. Partnerships and collaborations. So to implement the grant, the Enitan Story relied on the help of the workgroup members to identify and connect with existing and new partners.
Okay, lessons learned through this project, we encountered some challenges, especially that this came during the pandemic for us. So the first challenge was the obvious one, having to work through the pandemic in terms of, especially when you have to do outreach. That was one of the challenges we had. And another challenge was money. So with the grant, we are not allowed to spend any amount of money on lobbying. But then, we can only make things happen by lobbying. So we were restricted, but we are lucky that we got help, and I see Ryan came in the room, so thank you so much, Ryan. The Carpenters Union, they were able to volunteer to help us get the legislators to start doing something now, hopefully at the end of this session. And also, this was a large undertaking for us as a tiny organization. We are really grateful for the work group members that kept pushing us through. And I have to mention one of them is Caroline. Caroline, thank you so much for always being there at night, every time, anytime. Caroline will take the bullet for everybody and just show up. So thank you so much, Caroline. And we just relied on the goodwill of people all over. And we are really grateful for all the partners that have shown through for us. When we knock on the door, they open the door, so thank you so much. And we also like to say, just thank you to MDH for all the support. And every one of you, thank you so much for all the support that you have given to us through this process. It's been a journey, and we are really grateful for what we have learned throughout the program. Any questions? Questions? Or forever for your peace?
We do have next one of two panels that we have for today. And this one will be on survivor engagement, a meaningful approach to engaging survivors as subject matter experts. And we do have 3 panelists and a moderator. So I'll call their name to come up. In the interest of time, I will not read out all of their bios, but you're encouraged to take a look at them in the program for today. And but they're all very, very accomplished individuals, and we're really happy and excited to have them join us today. So first on the panel is Honorable Ronnie Marzi. And then we also have Honorable Bella Onaki. And Kila Marie Brandon. Those are our subject matter experts, very accomplished individuals. Take a few moments later to read the bios, very accomplished. We do have the moderator for this panel today is Amanda Colgrove.
Good morning, everyone. You're still good morning, right? Yes, we're still in the morning. Excellent. I'm not sure how well are you connected to the panel, the online Zoom over here? Because I don't know how well they're going to hear you from over there online without a microphone. And this thing,
The microphone is available.
I think it's kaput. It doesn't want to work.
It probably needs new batteries.
Yeah. Can you get new batteries for this? Thank you. It's just, yeah. In my experience, battery-operated microphones never last long enough. Well, we apologize for those online. The microphone is going to be cutting in and out, so you may not be able to hear our panelists that well from time to time. Are we ready to get started out in the audience? Excellent. So my name is Amanda. I work for the Minnesota Department of Health and the Safe Harbor Program. It has been my pleasure to work with Bukola for about 6 years now. And I just want to say, happy anniversary, Bukola. I had no idea the Enitan Story was celebrating their 10th year. And I just want to also say a big thank you to Bukola for her wisdom and guidance. I am more than just someone who is in a position of grant manager with her. I consider her to be a partner and someone that I turn to with all of my questions about how we move forward in this industry. So we're going to turn over to our panel now. I also put my information on my phone, which is very tiny and need glasses to see. I will ask the panelists to provide a brief introduction of themselves and how you've come to connect with your anti-trafficking work. So who's going to start with an introduction and how you came to connect with the anti-trafficking work?
I think I was going to start before I put the Edward on voice.
Sure, go ahead.
So my name is Tegan. I am executive director of a very small nonprofit that's been around for 9 years. So we celebrated our 10th year last year and next year, and super excited about it. It's kind of like having a child, birthing a child, raising a childhood, teenage years. I feel like have already happened for me in the organization. But I came to this work because I'm a victim survivor. The nonprofit work that I do is all about violence prevention, bystander intervention, education, reform, policy change, to really amplify the voices of those who are unheard and systemically and individually silenced by power-based violence. My master's is in criminal justice, specializing in prevention, intervention, and rehabilitation. I hold an LAPC, 2 bachelor's degrees in counseling and psychology and Christian ministries. And partway through my PhD, although I had to give it up, because did you know there's a lifetime limit on what you can get for your federal Pell Grant? There is. I found that out. And I hit it. So
school 3 years in. I have 1 more year left of my PhD and hopefully getting that done. So I came from a really poor background. I was trafficked as a youth all over the country. Thank you. And for me, growing up in such poverty, homelessness, in the slums or rural places without electricity, that kind of stuff, it really made a difference and impacted me. I was trafficked all the way through until age 18, and throughout my life since then, despite my education, despite the work that I do, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that I have disabilities, I have found myself in that loop of exploitation, being victimized again and again and again. And so, I hear about, how easy it is to re-exploit some of us that have gone through this, and it's really not because anything to do with us. It's to do with the system that doesn't understand us and the support that isn't there. So when I hear things like this today, knowing because they're moving forward, that there will be that in the future, I think it's just amazing. So, so I come to this work for a bunch of different reasons. One of the big things that I like to talk about that isn't talked about enough is in the correlation and the overlap between individuals with disabilities, cognitive, intellectual, and physical, and trafficking. So we really don't talk about it. I think it needs to have its own space. So anyway, that's a lot. I said I don't like my own voice, and then I talked for like 10 minutes. So we're just gonna, there you go.
Thank you. My name is Ronnie Motti. I'm originally from the Dominican Republic. I'm also about myself, or labor trafficking, and I'm an anti-human trafficking consultant. So I'm independent. I don't belong to any organization because I like to say whatever I think it's right. So I don't have a stamp for anybody. But I collaborate with so many organizations, with governments, with a lot of stakeholders, and also provide trainings to the federal agencies and state agencies as well, and also work with the community too. I love to really raise the awareness about labor trafficking specifically, because it's always left behind, and that's why we raise our voice and make sure people are listening and taking action too. So I love the movement. I'm not fully involved in the movement because it's really not easy to deal with so many things that's going on right now, but I do my best to have my voice at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ronnie. Hello, good morning to you all. My name is Belle Hunake. I'm a survivor of trafficking, labor trafficking. What else did you share? I'm spacing out. Okay. Okay. Why did I join the movement? I actually started after trafficking. I was in foster care for all my childhood and adult till I aged out. And then after I aged out, I noticed that, we all say we want to give back. I didn't know what that meant, so I went to school, got my bachelor's in criminal justice in Spanish, lived abroad for a little bit, and then came back and got my master's in social work. I'm a trained clinician, but right now I work for the government. I work for an Office of Refugee Resettlement, working with migrants crossing the borders from Central and South America. And that's allowed me, that's my professional job, but my really passion is advocacy for survivors of crime, including human trafficking, to sort of encourage representation so that people don't see us as just survivors. They see us as individuals that something happened to see us as professionals, to see us in our own light, to see us as parents, as business owners, to really give voice to all of us to say, this happened to us, but we're not defined by it. This happened to us, but that's not the only identity we assume. That we're so colorful, like many of you who might have stories. We are the same way too. And not see us as this fragile, broken people, but see us as empowered people with voice that are roaring everywhere. So that's why I'm a part of this movement. I love working alongside the survivors, our experts, my experience, because together we just echo, but not from a place of pain, but from joy. So yeah, Did I talk more than you?
I don't know, but it was so.
You were mentioning.
Okay, I was nice. Okay, I'll give this back to you.
So we will have time for audience questions, but we're going to kind of prime the pump, so to speak, and ask a couple of beginner questions. So for our panelists, our audience, both online and present, may be at different levels of understanding of labor trafficking, of engaging with subject matter experts with lived experience. What would you say is some of the most important things we need to know, either as a beginner or as someone who's been working in the field for a while, about working to end labor trafficking and engaging with subject matter experts?
Thank you. I think at all levels, what we first need to understand that labor trafficking is happening, and it is occurring everywhere, anywhere, and can happen to anybody. And that we have to open our minds and start listening more, because we still go out there and we talk about human trafficking, and everybody's as assuming it's just sex trafficking. I've been so many years already, and still it's like the community is not involved. The community, they don't have enough awareness on that, or maybe some state agencies. So we just need to understand first that it's a crime that is happening. It could happen to anybody. It doesn't really discriminate anyone, regardless of where you're coming from. People think of because it might happen to the immigrants, it might happen to the refugees, it happen to the people that is in poverty. Yeah, they are target for the criminals, but it could happen to anyone who has a high level education as well. So, you know, and it's happening, and we need to do something to stop it, and that's the problem that we're having. So I think it's just to teach people or educate people on how to identify first labor trafficking, and then how to respond to that once we identify what to do. You know, what is the next step, and how to actually approach a victim of labor trafficking, and how to connect that victim with the resources if they are available. That usually for labor trafficking, we lack of resources, and you're gonna hear me talking about that all the time, because I don't like when people in power are talking about things that they are doing, like some paper, but when you go to the reality, it's not happening. So still labor trafficking is lacking of resources for the victims and survivors of labor trafficking. So that's what gonna be, what I think is people should know. And like if you wanna do something, and if you wanna join, just by learning, listening, and acting, you can do a lot of things. You know, I always says that if you know the fact that what's going on, but you do nothing about it, you're part of the problem as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ronnie. You know, with labor trafficking, we have to think about the elements of crime, right? Fraud, coercion, and force. And so for me, it's not to have a hierarchy of victimization. What do I mean by that? Not to say that sex trafficking is more difficult than labor trafficking, or to say that, you know, let's not have a hierarchy and say one is better than the other. Pain leaves us the trace. You know, pain leaves injury, and both for sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And it's an emerging crime, meaning that every single time we have ways to identify, ways to prosecute, ways to address resources, traffickers find a way to, you know, be ahead of the game. They're very proactive, making sure that it's not detected, so they transition to become more of an organized crime. So we have to increase our effort. And so one thing about labor trafficking, at least I want to communicate today, is that it's an emerging industry for them. A lot of our resources in the past as a community, as organization, was focused solely on sex trafficking. And so we have to see the intersection and to see where are resources that can share based on what we've already done, and where are the gaps, and how can we fill those gaps. If we don't, then we're leaving some people behind. We don't want to create a community that leaves some people behind based on the crime. Yeah.
So my wheelhouse is definitely not labor trafficking. It is going to be your sex crimes, predatory crimes, but I see the overlap here, and I've seen it forever, because when I was being sex trafficked, I saw other people and other kids being, you know, gun running and drug trafficked and being forced to work in factories and things like that. So there really wasn't so much of a difference between us. We all knew that we didn't have a way out. We were all broke, some of us undocumented, and we basically just, you know? So what you said is so right. Like, we don't need to be comparing. I guess in a way, I do want to compare for a second, because I recently attended a training, heard a stat, like, I don't remember what it is. So maybe someone here will know it. But it's something about, like, in proportion between labor and sex trafficking cases only account for about 5% of all trafficking cases. 95% are unreported cases of labor trafficking. So I see sex trafficking as such a huge issue, but then I put that up next to, it's just a tiny, tiny bit of it compared to the thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are being labor trafficked. So that's alarming to me. We need to stop sensationalizing crime and start really listening to the survivors, you know? And just because it's sex trafficking doesn't mean it should get anything more or be more interesting than, you know? Yeah, so thank you.
I just want to add to that, as she was saying, we shouldn't be competing sex trafficking and labor trafficking. I mean, it's a crime, and they need action to be taken in order to really do something. And what I see, you know, I was just checking the states that are on the higher risk with labor trafficking and labor trafficking cases. And I see the state of Minnesota, like, it's way down, like nothing is going on here. But it means, so you guys are doing a great job by detecting and providing services for victims and potential victims of labor trafficking, or nothing is being done, or nothing being reported, or there's not enough awareness out there, because I'm pretty sure with the industry like the agriculture and the construction that we have here, there's a lot of labor trafficking out there. Forced labor, I mean, you can name it. But what I want to say is, not because you don't hear about that, it's not happening. It's really happening, and that's why we need to take action now. And if we really do, because I was part of the Advisory Council on Human Trafficking for the White House for 2 terms, and the main recommendation that we always have is that increase investigation. Just increase investigations, and the issue was always money. There was no budget for that. So, but how are you going to find out, how are you going to really see what's going on if you don't have investigators out there, making sure that labor trafficking is not happening? So.
That's a great point. Thank you. I turned my mic off so I didn't accidentally cough into the microphone while you were all speaking, and then forgot. Of course, it's just like Zoom world. You forget to unmute. All right, so moving on a little bit, thinking, you kind of referenced this a little bit here about where we might be in the state of Minnesota as far as our efforts to address labor trafficking. Let's think about this both federally and statewide across the country, and maybe even more locally in our communities. How far do you think we have come in addressing labor trafficking and providing those resources and those investigations federally, statewide, across the country, and more locally?
Do you guys want me to start? Who wants to volunteer as tribute? Who wants to volunteer as tribute? Okay. Thank you for that. I think it's important to notice the where we started and where we are and how far along we have to go. Federally, there wasn't a lot. We have to look at, there is less than, I want to say, 20 prosecuting convicted cases of labor trafficking, right? It's not that it's not happening, it's just that it's really, really hard. No, that's okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, yes, Bella Unake, U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking, Honorable Ronnie and myself and Honorable Bukola, we were part of the White House Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. We advised the President of Interagency Task Force on hey, government, this is what you need to do federally. And so that's our little thing. What I was saying is that there is a very small number of convicted cases per capita in this country on people prosecuting convicted people who are traffickers. And I don't think it's not that it's not happening. I think that people, you talk about sensationalizing crime, people see it as labor exploitation or something that has to do with wage or improper payment or some sort of that. They don't see the aspect of criminality. And so I think we have to continue to merge both the criminal aspect of it, it's an organized crime, to have people exploited using component of force, fraud, and coercion for your benefit of monetary gain. It's not something that's normal, nor should we normalize it. So I think federally, there is a lot of effort from all, both stakeholder, nonprofit, for-profit, to some extent, to have awareness of it. When we know what we're addressing, then we can potentially take efforts to fix it. And so I think there's been a lot of increased awareness. Like we're doing now, we're having a conversation about labor trafficking, what it is, the trends we see. So I think federally, there's been efforts to educate, which I think speaks to the prevention aspect of the law, what is the law again? TVPA. The TVPA. How many of you know what the TVPA is? Raise your hand a little high. Okay, everybody know. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It determines how trafficked victims migrate through the system after they've been found or identified. Same thing with traffickers. They prosecute traffickers. You're supposed to give justice to victims. So I think that law was created to better the outcome of trafficking survivors. So I think we've done a lot as a country, as people, as communities. But the large gap is continuing, I want to say self-identification. How can we do things so that people who are being exploited can say, I think I'm being trafficked. Where can I go to get help? And so we need to do more of that in all levels, I think.
Also, with labor trafficking, I've seen some improvement, a lot of achievement, I can say, because before, it was not actually existing. About labor trafficking, nothing. And because we've been raising our voices and just, claim that something needs to be done, things are happening. And it's happening first at the federal level. And I'm a witness, I can testify on that, because when I was in the Bachelor Council, I saw all the efforts from the federal agencies that they tried, and they did their best. There was something that couldn't really implement because it takes so many other factors for them to implement, but they've been working on that. And they've been listening, which is always said is the most important thing, that they listened what survivors have to say at a table. And my problem is seeing that what is being done at the federal level is not going down to the state levels. That's a problem that I've seen by when we visit states and we talk about labor trafficking. Sometimes, and I don't want to, I love law enforcement, the good law enforcement. I love them because they are always protecting us, working for us, and I love them. But I just dislike when you go to a place and you try to, provide a training and people are not willing to do anything because they have their standard and nobody's going to change how they are. But that has to change at all levels, talking about the states, so that they are willing to be trained on how to work with victims and survivors of human trafficking, and especially to learn more about labor trafficking. I know, and it's not only the state's agencies or the federal agencies, but at all levels, people, they don't want to really know much about labor trafficking. I know how difficult it is to find the signs, like how can I identify someone who is a potential victim of labor trafficking. There's a lot of signs that we can talk about, and that's why to be trained properly on this issue about labor trafficking, that's the key. And I have seen a lot of improvement, as I said, but it's a lot of work to do still. So it's a long way, and I'm glad Bukola was always sharing with me about what's going on in Minnesota, and I'm glad about the bill that they were introduced. It was introduced in March 1st, I believe. It was the SF 2269 bill that's gonna is advocating for have some money to provide services to victims of labor trafficking and forced labor. That's it. To see that to me is amazing. So it's a step that we're going forward and we know what we're gonna do. So once the legislators are listening they will put more attention and they will do more things for what is need to be done in the moment.
I'm going to just add something off the wall here, but one of the things when you were talking about training is, and what labor trafficking, the signs, things like that, I feel like maybe it's back to sensationalism, but, and it happens with sex trafficking as well. Do you ever see the posters where everybody's like really young and like you're stereotypical, I don't think we consider the fact that people over 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever, are at a very high risk for actually being trafficked. So I just want to include that. Again, with the training, we need to focus more than just on what everybody is typecasting it to be. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's really great. All right, we're going to open this up to audience questions. I would just like to remind everyone that our panelists have agreed to come into this space to share their expertise with us. We want this to remain a safe space for them. And so if you have a question, please ask yourself first if you would want someone to ask that of you in front of a group. So just keep that in mind. Do we have any questions from our audience? Yes, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the mic runner.
Question that I have, could you share a success that you have experienced in your role as a subject matter expert making changes around anti-trafficking response? Any success that you have experienced?
I don't know how to qualify that, but I think I would say that success for me, if I were to capture it, would just be how I define success, and that's justice. For me personally, is the ability to look at myself and say, you know what? You're not defined by what happened to you. You're not defined by statistics, Like, I remember when I was in foster care, all these groups of people would come and talk to us about their success stories, but there was always this undertone as if we were not ever going to achieve that sort of success. Because, statistically, foster carers are more likely to go to juvenile justice system and they don't graduate, blah, blah, blah. But then I never, like my identity, it's not based on what I've been through or what will happen. My identity is that I am. And so cultivating that is what I see as success. And being in a room of people, if they're policymakers, if there are industries, if there are other people in supply chain or whatnot, and be able to speak to them and say, you know what, I'm a peer. And recently, as of last week, I was testifying in front of Congress, and I was trying to elevate things that I think are important. And then I can see that, you know what, I'm not in this alone. I'm not in this alone. So that's what I would say, Sarah, as like success is being able to cultivate. Because what trafficking attempts to do is erase your identity. In isolation, you can believe almost anything about yourself. I mean, anything about yourself. And I think traffickers really target your identity to your core. So long after trafficking ends, then you have to really like, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? But then being able to recultivate your identity is something that I've worked tirelessly to do, not from a place of anger or pain, but from a place of peace. And so no matter what heights I go, I always say, you know what? I'm a success story, not because I want to defy the odds or the statistic, it's because I want to recultivate who I think I am at my core. So that's success to me.
Thank you. I just want to add to what you were saying, success. I've seen so much already, and an example is Bukola and her organization. I mean, before you wouldn't see a survival, leading organizations, and the work that have been done by Bukola and others, survivals have been amazing in the movement. So this is success, what I call success. But also, before a few years ago, you could see organizations just to have survivals not at the table, if no survival input in their work, because they need to check mark like, hey, I'm a survivor informant, we're doing this with survivors. that wasn't true. But now things are being taken seriously. I think it's a success. That people can really, I've been listening to what we guys said, and now we have a voice at the table. So I think that's been very successful.
For me, success is just getting up another day. That's it sometimes, right? I get tired and exhausted, and I can try to focus on the accomplishments, and sometimes I'm able to. For me, that means I'm working with quite a few larger corporations, nationally and internationally, around aerospace and the development of our cislunar orbit space and our, space. I'm working with space people, and I am introducing, talking about these laws, introducing how are we going to stop what's already happened here in this world, and in this country, all the countries. How are we going to stop that? If we're moving to another planet, we're planning on going ahead and we're going to be exploiting the planet. Obviously, we're going to need people to exploit the planet, right? So how can we stop that before it happens? How can we be proactive about that? Because we've got people going into space here in the next 5 to 10 years, and we need to start looking at, and what happens if there's a sexual assault in space? There's no laws, there's nothing. So that's kind of, that's my success. I think also being able to be called on for my areas of expertise, which is, again, I'm autistic, so to even be here talking and being able to that for me is a success. And being able to talk to organizations about it and about how can we treat our kids, our adults, how can we treat those individuals who are coming into the system? They're already traumatized. But for those who have autism or are mute or any other intellectual, cognitive, physical disability, how much harder is it? And how much easier is it to continue re-exploiting those people? And so I just, those are my successes. If I wrote them down, I was yay. But to be honest, it really just is getting up every day and doing something proactive and good to try to change what we have as a world. So.
Yes. Let me see. Can we get you a mic, Colette?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just moving on to here.
So thanks for all your expertise and insight. My question is, I'm on the board of the Enitan Story, and this idea of how do we prevent this? How do we teach from a very young age? Because we're teaching a lot of different things to little kids to keep them safe. And I know that trafficking is even as adults, it's so difficult for us to talk about. But I really think that at some point we need to really focus on teaching kids from a very young age. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and yes, that. We also need to be educating families and other individuals, but we need to know that really it's with our youth, right? There's a quote that I really like, and it's what's learned in the cradle lasts to the grave. So I feel like we need to be starting some of these principles just of behavior at a very young age, and then following it up. We need to be talking about this in pre-K and Head Start, and why are we not? I think there's a way to do it without, the biggest thing that I've heard, especially from rural schools, is that trafficking doesn't happen, and also we can't talk about the details of trafficking, especially sex trafficking or anything gross with labor trafficking. We can't talk about those things. It doesn't happen here. Unfortunately, it really happens in rural areas, and so we do need to be talking about it. And I think it would be more normalized if we brought it into the classroom and into our schools, into our churches, our pre-Ks, whatever, daycares. I think it would have a lasting impact. So.
Thank you. I think that needs to start with the family. Since I have my kids, since they were little, I've been always telling them, hey, do not allow anybody to touch it. If they touch it, you gotta let me know. Don't be afraid that they're gonna probably threaten you with killing you or do some harm you or me. So that's from the beginning. That's the principle and foundation that we have for the family. So we need to teach kids from the early age. They need to understand, in another with another language, of course, but we gotta let them know that they have rights and that they cannot allow anybody to really, abuse them in any way. So if they learn from the early age, they will be ready to get prepared if something happens out there, because and the problem is that I see with families say, oh no, that's like you said, it's not happening, and it won't happen to my kids. That can happen to your kids, especially at a very early age that they don't understand well. But if you train them how to protect themselves and how to look for help, I mean, that's gonna be a big difference, and they can really defend themselves out there, because you're not gonna be 24 hours with your kids. But we need to start, and I know the Department of Education, they have some good programs to teach kids about human trafficking, and I really like that because regardless of the age, they start teaching them, what is human trafficking, what is that about, and what you can do in case you're facing a situation that you feel coerced or you feel threatened by someone, and how to respond to that as a little kid. So I think we need to start teaching that. That's going to be a way to avoid from happening to others.
Thank you. How many of you remember receiving education about the women's suffrage movement? Yeah, history is one of my favorite subjects. And when we talk about prevention, protection, prosecution, there's a 4P: policy, partnership, policy / and punishment. Yeah, we keep adding P's to the list, and we need to just be better at one. And so I think, I think about prevention a lot. What can we do? Because we're always reactive. And that's just the nature of it. But I think about the women's suffrage movement. How, there are so many issues that women in the 1920s were facing, partner violence and all other issues, and they just pick one point of advocacy: right to vote. And once they face right to vote, they started empowering women. Now we get to have bank accounts. We get to have a say in what we do. So I think in the anti-trafficking movement, prevention is so many. How do we start? We can't track it because it's so ever-changing. If the issue is so big, so if we could just focus on one prevention. And prevention, what do we think of when we think prevention? So I think we can borrow certain things, modalities from other movements, because we know that the identity of traffickers are so different. They are transitioning to being an organized crime. And so, yes, if we address schools, then we're able to educate young people and say, listen, don't exploit each other for gain of any sort. But then we'll have to address the issues that their homes, how they're raising in their environment, largely depend on the kind of mental health they have. So there's just so many issues on issues. So in the trafficking movement, likewise, if we pick one thing, just like the women's suffrage movement, they've decided the right to vote and they push for that. Once they do that, everything else sort of fell into, we still have issues, but it's not like the 1920s anymore. Likewise, in the anti-trafficking movement, there is so much in the agriculture setting, the unaccompanied children that I work with, there's so many things going on there. In the foster cases, there's exploitation in every sub-industries. If we pick one thing, prevention, what do we think about when we think prevention? Is it economic empowerment for communities that suffers from poverty? What is it can we fix? If we fix one thing, will that sort of open doors for the other things to just be addressed as a product of that? So I don't know if that addresses your question, but that's what I'm thinking about is we want to do so many things at the same time and we're dropping out all of them. If we just focus on one and improve one, then we won't be here talking about exploitation. It's not a good conversation to have.
Yeah, and I just want to add also, you're concerned about kids. There is one of our survival colleagues, she has an organization that the name is Hare, and I love the way they create comic books for kids to teach about human trafficking in general. And because as it's a tough topic to deal with kids, to speak to the kids, but in those comic books, it's amazing how they get trapped in the story that being telling there, in like the advices for the kids to learn and how to protect themselves if they have any situation about human trafficking?
So I was just going to add that I think a big part of educating our youth is really education, and it's awareness. And I would see a success being in the movement being more normalization around the topic. So it's not as much of an uncomfortable topic for us to be having, If the stigmatization is gone, or at least reduced or diminished, we're going to see a lot more people, I would think, coming forward because they don't have maybe as much of that shame. But again, I think that we have to start young with those conversations. It has to be a cultural and societal shift. So
We have time for, I think, one more question, and there's one online. Do you think that re-messaging is important, like stranger danger?
Yes. There's a story of someone who's worked in the trafficking movement forever, and she told this to me, and I just loved it. She said, going from harm prevention to preventing harm changed everything. Harm prevention, everybody was like, oh, wow, harm prevention, we've talked about this forever. What is harm prevention, et cetera? It's got this, this typecast belief about what it is. And she changed the words and a little bit of messaging, more than a little bit, but you know what I mean? That was enough, I think. So to really get people to listen.
Yeah, like you said, I believe changing the message would be collaboration. It's just to be inclusive in the work that we're doing. Just to get the partnership, to build that partnership is just changing the message, but understanding that we're not alone in this movement and that we have so many entities that we can count on, but just the collaboration part, because I know by myself I won't be able to do many things. And maybe I go to Congress and they're not gonna listen to me, but I go and I speak to my state senator or someone in power, and I collaborate with that person, I will be changing the message until it's listening. That's the thing. And I would do anything possible to make sure that my voice is heard.
Yes, I agree. I think, changing the message or restructuring the message is a part of it. I think the broader issue here is again, addressing vulnerabilities. We can change the message, we can swing it, we can republish it, but as long as there's a subset of our society that is going through severe, intense vulnerabilities, we will, no matter how we change the message, it's almost like addressing the wound, not the actual illness. It's like addressing the symptoms, not the actual illness. So we have to continue to find a way to address the actual illness, not the symptoms. Where we can provide, is it CPR or CPA? Which one? CPR. ESL problems. We can provide CPR to the symptoms, but we have to address the core. Why are people being vulnerable to exploitation? Going back to my point, in isolation and suffering, people will believe almost everything. Children don't want to resort into doing things to feed themselves. We have a society, our communities where people are starving. So even if we address stranger danger, that places danger outside of the home. There are families that people are being exploited in the home. So what does stranger danger do in that situation? It doesn't address anything. It's just a conversation. If you tell us, that's implying that we have identified the source of trafficking. It's not addressing what vulnerabilities increase the likelihood of that child. We have a friend whose father exploited him. And this was a very affluent white male in America. His father was worth a lot of money. He was a neurosurgeon who exploited his boiled child for many, many years and used his boiled child to exploit other children in his community. This is not a person that was poor. This is not a person of a BIPOC community, a person of color community. This wasn't an issue of poverty. This wasn't an issue of money. This is a morality issue. As long as we have a subset in our community who are facing mental health issues of some sort, no matter how much we structure the language, no matter how much you bend the truth, it's still the truth. No matter how much we massage it, sorry, don't. Okay.
Yeah, you can touch it.
Okay. No matter how much we massage it, the problem remains. And so I like the idea of stranger danger, but it's not realistic. It's just it's just, yeah.
All right, we are scheduled to be done at 11:30 for this panel, but there is one question on here that I would like to read out. And if we could just take a few minutes here to answer that, I think it would be really great. What is your opinion and experience with post-traumatic growth theories that you can heal in the midst of your trauma?
I think that's a bunch of bullshit, excuse me. I'm so sorry. I think it can be true, but if you're in the midst of trauma and you're continually having that wound pulled, you know, the scab, like you said, if you're continually, you have a hatchet wound, right? And you're trying to put a Band-Aid on it over and over and over again, it's not going to really work, right? You're not going to be able to take care of that hatchet wound. And so I feel like trying for people to try to heal from their trauma, they need a chance to rest. They need a chance to be around people who love and support them, or at least don't exploit them on a continuous basis, you know? So like and we see this in all types of fields, but, and what is healing for other people might be different, you know? So for me, going back into this work after being assaulted myself has, in a way, been extremely empowering. It's been great for my growth. On the other hand, it has actually led me to falling into worse situations of trafficking and poverty and etc. and those cycles of abuse because of the work that I'm in, because I'm having to relive my whole life over and over again. Choices my parents made for me. I was also really trafficked when I was young. And so, yeah, I personally, I don't think it's going to work for me. I don't think that'll work.
Every case is different, it's unique. So people heal in different way. There are people that are healing through the process and are still working in the movement, but there are people that takes a long time to really heal what is inside them and not to be exposed to the triggers that they might have working in the movement or being around other survivors. So we have an alarm that is going on. Oh, is there you?
I'm so sorry.
So that's fine.
That's what I thought at first.
It's lunchtime, but we're gonna go there. But I mean, the healing goes, you know, it's different in every individual. It's totally different. Like in my case, I can tell you, you need to be a part at the beginning of the process and heal yourself first before you expose to others. And sometimes we feel like we're ready, and we're not ready. Especially when we hear in detail story of something that happened, and it just brings back all the things that you went through. It means that you're not ready. It takes, you know, for people, some people it takes longer than others, but in the process only you self-know. But I love about the survivor community because we are part of the healing each other. We support each other. And I'm going to tell you, I was in an event in Punta Cana for 5 days, and there was a situation that one of the audience got mad at me because I was not speaking Spanish. Everything was in English, but they have the translator. And so she approached me, and there was a survivor with me, and she was like almost yelling at me, but she's like, it's nothing personal. But that survivor was tapping on me and say, hey, you got my support. Like, this is kind of the support that we need, and this is part of the healing that we have among each other.
I'll be quick. I know people are hungry. I think the question, you know, as you heard from my colleagues, you know, when we talk about trauma, treatment of complex trauma, that stems from childhood. Yes, you know, we have, I mentioned that I'm a trained clinician, we have neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to grow itself. So we have the ability to grow. However, like you mentioned, you cannot heal in an environment that keeps hurting you. And you see that in many survivors of crime, trafficking included, that it isn't until you are in a stable, safe environment, that's when your journey of healing, however that means, begins to start. But again, there's so many that, you know, the physiological response to pain and complexity of abuse and trauma, it targets your neurons. It targets your brain in the way that it rewires your brain. And so much that, you know, I just turned 30 2 weeks ago. And it isn't until now where I've you know, throughout my time, I I was in foster care and I received mental health services. It isn't until now as a professional where I'm like, a few years ago, something is off about me. Yes, I'm accomplished in doing this thing, but there's this like cloud that, no matter what, I can escape it. And I don't like to talk about that. This is my first time talking about it because there's a stigma that's associated with it. People look at you different because, okay, she's a little crazy. But it's not it. It's me trying to understand what happened to me that caused me to be this way. That as a professional, as a person in the community, as just a human, something is off about me. And I dedicated my entire paycheck to really resolving that. And it looked different at different stages. And now I'm trying different treatment modalities. Talk therapy no longer works for me. Now my brain received EMDR successfully. And so, but that's a privilege that other people don't have. And so when we talk about trauma theories that work there is not a prescription of a modality that works for a victim. Some people, it may be talk therapy, it may be EMDR, which is a type of mental health treatment. It may be religion. It may be exposure therapy. But it is so important for us to continue to advocate for resources. Federal level, government, these people need money to go to get services. It's not everybody who can afford therapy. It's not everybody who can say, I will use God as healing, because some survivors have experienced religious trauma. So we have to create a community where rehabilitation in form of support is seen in our action, and that will have to include, if you're in a community and you know therapists, or you're in a community where you do yoga. I know a survivor that responded very well to yoga through healing that way. We have to start putting those services in place to help people. If not, the modalities that we ascribe to, it's just prescriptive, and it doesn't work for everybody.
That's really great. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. We appreciate your presence here and your insight into this matter. Thank you for your patience in allowing us to answer that last question.
Lunchtime.
Well, thanks again to our panelists and our moderator. Another round of applause for them. Lots of really great insights, lots to think about. And thanks for giving us all of those ideas so that we can do this work. So thank you again. So at this time, we'll take a break for lunch for our audience, our virtual audience. I want to say thank you for hanging in there with us through our technical challenges. But we will be taking a break for lunch, and we will resume at noon. So we'll see you back then. Again, thank you for joining us, staying with us. Next on the agenda, we have our second and final panel on labor trafficking. A multidisciplinary approach to responding to labor trafficking. And we do have several accomplished panelists and moderator with us today. We have Caroline Palmer, JD Safe Harbor Director, Minnesota Department of Health. We also have Agent Bobby Joe Padernik. DPS Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Predatory Crimes Section, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We also have Honorable Ronnie Marty, Subject Matter Expert, Honorable Bella Honaki, Subject Matter Expert, and our moderator for this panel is Sarah Ladd, JD Human Trafficking Child Protection Program Coordinator, Child Safety and Prevention Unit with the Department of Human Services. So, thanks everyone. A round of applause for our panel and moderator.
All right. Hello, everyone. and we are just getting, I think, our screen set up. Hopefully the people, I can't see anyone, so hopefully Zoom people, you're there somewhere. And we're getting a camera now focused on our panelist table, so you all can see who's talking. And I'll just pass this microphone down as we go. So we wanted to start today, as we're going to have this conversation over the next 45 minutes or so, about multidisciplinary responses to labor trafficking. Once an individual victim has been identified, what does it look like to respond? So we're going to be really kind of getting down to brass tacks here, if that's the phrase, of the how to, the what, the who, the why we need to do this. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the challenges. So in order to have this conversation, we wanted to just spend a few minutes at the beginning piecing together what is labor trafficking. So anyone here in the room, what is labor trafficking? I'll take one in-person response and then one or two in-person responses, and if anyone online wants to add something in, if you're there, I don't see anything, but if you're there, if you want to add something into the chat, please feel free to do that too. So, somebody want to volunteer, thinking about all that we've learned today or what you knew coming into the room? What do we mean by labor trafficking? We all came here for some reason, wanting to either learn about labor trafficking or because you're working with individuals experiencing labor trafficking, so what is it?
In your own words, whatever you
in your own words.
Learn about it.
It doesn't need to be 22 USC 7102. Yes, Jane, thank you.
So by definition, I believe it is forced labor for little or no pay. Isolation is usually a big part of it. That's it.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Anybody want to add something? Thank you, Jane. Applause for Jane. Woo! Anybody want to add something about what labor trafficking looks like or what it is? I'm sorry, I just keep looking at the Department of Labor. People are like right in front of me. Yes, go ahead.
Where to stay?
Being coerced into working or feeling like you don't have a choice into taking a job, and then maybe your documents are taken away, you are forced to live there, work overtime, and not get paid for that, etc.
Awesome. Okay, that is super helpful. So anyone online in the chat or want to unmute and add anything about what labor trafficking is, what it looks like? Trying to pull in our online people here. I'm just hoping a voice is gonna come from somewhere with someone saying something. No? If anyone wants to jump in, we can see you on the chat, or go ahead and put a hand up and we'll get to you. Okay, so in the meantime, let's, I want to just spend just 2 or 3 minutes here. That is great. I think we have a pretty good understanding. We talked a lot already about sex and labor trafficking, both being forms of human trafficking that overlap. So this is really what I wanted to put up here, that we've been wrestling with here in Minnesota, is understanding kind of labor exploitation, labor trafficking. What is actually happening to victims and survivors who are experiencing labor trafficking or labor exploitation? So when, as we talked about with the 2 responses here, we're often seeing labor trafficking having elements of force or coercion, people feeling that they don't have a choice about working, doing some type of work or services. Now, we also have labor exploitation, which our Department of Labor folks could tell us a lot more about. That is all kinds of exploitative work circumstances where the laws, labor laws, are not being followed and people are being taken advantage of in different ways. But it's not the same as labor trafficking. Now, I put around the outside some of the things that we're seeing popping up a lot as we're exploring. You know, you heard about today that there is a bill in the legislature to create funding for labor trafficking services. There also is a bill that is soon to be signed or maybe has been signed already that amends our definition of labor trafficking in state law to make it clearer, easier to prosecute. So great things happening. We are also developing new responses in the child welfare system and trying to enhance our services through Safe Harbor. So some of the things that we're seeing kind of popping up where there's intersections, just wanted to point out really briefly that we're seeing a lot of discussion around forced criminality, both in the intersection between sex and labor trafficking, and even apart from that. Gil Murray mentioned that a little bit this morning with seeing kids having to do all kinds of different things, drug running or different things like that. That would be forced criminality. We're also seeing a lot of discussion around family businesses. What does intrafamilial trafficking look like? What does it look like to be trafficked in the context of your family's business? Some questions. And then some common themes that we're seeing is intersection with child labor laws. Think about the big, some of the big cases that we've seen happen recently here in Minnesota. Across many different industries. So this is a slide that maybe some of you have seen before, but just to highlight again, it was mentioned briefly this morning, kind of the range of industries that people can be trafficked in. So those illegal types of services, those transient services, services where there's a middle person, that'd be fisher, or any type of job where you can be isolated or invisible, where people don't often see you doing your work. So I wanted to just highlight last thing before we get to our panel to set our context here. You know, we've had a couple of cases here in Minnesota. So just to set our baseline here for some of the conversation around challenges and around how to do this work. We're in many ways at the beginning of this work. And so I put up this little screenshot of Hennepin County's first labor trafficking case that was in 2019. Many of you also may have heard of the recent news reports about the large slaughterhouse in Worthington, Minnesota that had many children under the age of 18 working there, and some questions around whether labor trafficking was occurring. In both of those situations, I think lots of complexity about what was the multidisciplinary response? Was there one? What did the collaboration look like? How can we, at these beginning stages, plan for a more effective, more collaborative response to really meet the needs of victims and survivors? So that's the brief context that the panel wanted me to provide. As we get started, hearing from each of them about their work, their intersection with this topic. And we're actually going to start that right now with some introductions here. So again, I'm going to have each of you introduce briefly, name and role, also your connection with this topic, multidisciplinary response to labor trafficking, and then any opening comment you want to make to frame the discussion that we'll have. So I'm just going to pass it down here.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Caroline Palmer, and I'm the Safe Harbor Director at the Minnesota Department of Health. I think most people here know what Safe Harbor is, but I'm just going to give a very brief overview. Safe Harbor is our statewide response to human trafficking and exploitation. Over the years, we've really focused on exploitation, sexual exploitation of youth under the age of 24. In recent years, through federal funding, and now we're starting to see this in state funding, we're expanding to responding to labor trafficking and labor exploitation too. So again, we are basically the Department of Health. When Safe Harbor was first put into place about over a decade now, we really wanted to have a public health response informing how we go about looking at trafficking and exploitation in our state. But we also are very much a multidisciplinary response. We partner with the Department of Human Services, with Sarah over in the child welfare response. We partner with the Office of Economic Opportunity on the shelter and housing response. We partner with the Office of Justice Programs and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in the Department of Public Safety. So we look at the law enforcement response, the investigative response. We're partnering more with the Attorney General's office now on prosecutions. I mean, it really goes across. So I think that's part of the reason why I'm here today is Safe Harbor is a multidisciplinary response. It's always been planned out that way. And through all of our grantees that we have across the state, some of whom are here in the room today, we all come together to respond in ways that are based on our expertise and roles. And I think that's what makes our system really strong. I'm going to pass it over to Bobby Jo.
Thank you. And my name is Bobby Jo Pazdernick. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the Predatory Crime Section at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
And for those of you that don't know what the Minnesota BCA is for short, it is our statewide criminal investigative agency. The section that I supervise, agents and civilians, is the predatory crime section. So the agents investigate human trafficking, both sex and labor, internet crimes against children, and non-compliant predatory offenders. My role in human trafficking began back in 2017. First, I have to tell you, Bella, you said you had a 30-year mark a couple of weeks ago. Well, in a couple of weeks, I have my 30 years of full-time law enforcement. Yes. So, it's been a long haul, but back in 2017, I was asked to step up and create a statewide human trafficking investigative task force, which I did. At that time, labor trafficking really didn't have any role in that creation because it was funded specifically for sex trafficking. But as we started building this task force out, we quickly identified the huge gap of labor trafficking not being identified, not getting any attention in Minnesota and honestly around the country. And so it became very important as part of our task force and a mission for myself and for my state collaborative partners to start bringing this attention to the state of Minnesota. And so my comment for all of you in moving forward in today is, first of all, I applaud all of you for being here because that is a challenge for us right now to get Minnesota to wake up and realize that this is a heinous crime. And I'm going to get passionate right now, and those of you that have seen me present before know that I do this because it angers me when people talk about human trafficking synonymously with sex trafficking. There are two parts of human trafficking, and it is sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And I need you to hear it from me in addition to these fine folks that we're here with, because I am overseeing and supervising these crimes that are being investigated. And these predators that prey on the vulnerabilities of our Minnesotans are by far controlling more violently, physically, and mentally. And it is happening all across our state.
Thank you. So you already know my name, Ronnie Mori. But the reason why I'm really part of this is because, as they were mentioning, just a gap about more information on human trafficking, on labor trafficking, and how we're gonna have like effective first responder if they are not trained properly on labor trafficking. So yeah, they can respond to a situation with sex trafficking, but what about with labor trafficking? And that is what I'm here, and that's what I'm gonna, as I said, I'm gonna be pushing my voice forward until I've been heard by everyone and changes have been made. And I know changes have been made already, but we need to keep working on that. And that's my reason why I'm here. And as she's so passionate about it, I am too. So labor trafficking is something that is in my heart, in my soul, and I will advocate for that my whole life.
I feel like you all spoke a lot. So my name is Bella, and I spoke to you previously about why I'm here. I'm just passionate about making change.
All right, so we have 3 questions that I'll pose to our panelists, and we're going to take a pause and answer questions that you all have, and then we'll come back and do one last big question about some of the challenges and opportunities. So just so you know what's going to happen. So the first question is for all of you, any of you who want to answer, why is collaboration important in the response after a survivor of labor trafficking is identified? If you can give an example from your experience, either in practice or in protocol or policy, that would be great. So here we're getting to the why. Who wants to start?
So collaboration is important after, before, during, across the board. If we don't have a collaboration in place, to even start when we're developing protocols to figure out how we're even going to respond to these cases. We're all going to be kind of running around not knowing which way to go and who to talk to. So first off, we need to create protocol so we're all prepared and ready, and that includes law enforcement, prosecution, healthcare, social services, child welfare. I mean, everybody who's responding has to be at the table. So when a survivor is identified, that protocol can go into place and it can start happening. And that means if Bobby Joe is getting the call, Bobby Joe knows who to contact within social services, with a regional navigator, within the healthcare, where are they taking somebody immediately if they need healthcare treatment? When does the prosecutor get involved? When is child welfare getting called? Or if child welfare is the one that starts it off, where does that go down the line? It can go in so many different directions. For the victim survivor, this means that they're not having to maybe tell their story over and over again, their experience over and over again. This means that they get directly to the impacted help that they need at that moment, and it could be their basic needs. It could be getting them to a safe place. It could be getting them food, clothing, hotel, whatever it is. Then they are in a better position to be able to work with other parts of the system. And so this just means that everybody is not stepping on each other's toes, that they're respecting each other's roles. And when our hope is, when it works well, is that things work fairly smoothly. And so the survivor is getting warm handoffs. They're not kind of lost, wondering about what's going to happen next. And so we know also that once somebody has been identified, it's a long experience for them. If the case is going to be investigated, if they are going to get services, if there is going to be a prosecution, they're in this for the long haul. This could be several years. And so all of these initial relationships that are created within a collaboration mean that that person feels like they've got a team of people that they know and a team of organizations working with them and responding to them. So I think not only for the system to be able to work smoothly, but also for the victim survivor to feel like they have trust and support and can continue to work with that system, having this collaboration is so important.
Well said, Caroline. There's not a whole lot that I need to add to that. However, understanding that, for me, from my perspective, an investigation, that is such a complex investigation because these traffickers are savvy, right? And the communities and law enforcement are not identifying that these are trafficking situations. So it takes an army for us to attack this issue in our state, which means all systems need to be working together and being respectful of one another. And I was asked for an example, and unfortunately I have so many examples of how our systems have failed people that were in need of assistance, and I'll just give you a very brief, short example. So as we were working on a protocol, and as we were trying to bring awareness to our state, I got a phone call from a local law enforcement agency who had been called down to a hospital, right? So great, somebody identified there was something more than just, and I don't mean to take away from an assault, but it was more than just that one thing, just an assault. There was something else going on. They called the local agency. The local agency recognized, oh, I have no idea what this is, but I know who to call. So my phone rings, and I said, oh, I'll be right down, okay? When you are having a multidisciplinary response, you have to think of a lot of different things. The investigation comes second to taking care of the immediate short-term needs, basic needs of the individual. That was my number one goal. This individual was still in that trafficking situation. I needed to figure out who can I get to help her, to get her safe, number one, and get her her basic needs. And then long-term, who's going to be by her side for the long term? Because as we talked about, historical trauma doesn't cure itself overnight, right? We need all these support systems working together. I started calling, and trust me, I have a lot of connections in this state. I started calling every single connection I had, and it was, sorry, I've got nothing. Sorry, she's too old. We talk about the age of 24. Sorry, she's not a domestic violence victim. I'm sitting there going, what am I can't bring this lady home with me as much as I would love to, but I also can't keep her in a situation that is unsafe. That's why we need all of these systems to work together, and that's why we have been fighting so hard over the last 3 years to bring awareness, to change laws, and to find services, find money that will help labor trafficking victims.
Thank you, well said. And it's right. You know, the well-being of the human being is the one priority when we know there is a case of human trafficking. So, in knowing what to do, how to respond, and they were saying, you know, the right connection, because there are a lot of people in the movement saying, in organizations saying that they are providing services. I like your example because, you know, when you try to reach out for help, and there are organizations who are getting money from the state, and they are just saying that they are doing something, they are not doing that. And Bukola can testify about an example, someone who needed help at a point, and Bukola has to go in and like make an appointment to someone, or will provide that kind of service for that person. And it took Bukola to speak to someone else about that person and then respond to that. Sometimes the response will be about life or death. I mean, in certain situations, because every case is different. But what I mean is, if we're the first responder, I mean, if we're saying that we're doing something like providing services for that one a victim is identified, that we're doing that we're actually doing it. It's not just saying that when we call and we call for resources, that we know who to call and get help for that person. That's the first thing, to get that person in the same place, that feel comfortable, and after that, of course, the investigation is coming out after that. But the well-being of the individual is the main thing. So collaboration is the key. Collaboration with the right responders, with people that are really working on it, people that really care about it, and there is money. I don't know about in the state of Minnesota, but federally, there's money. They just need to allocate the proper amount of money to work on labor trafficking.
Thank you, Honorable Ronnie. Agent Bobby Joe, I think you mentioned as well, the importance of making sure that we're all on the same page. And I'm sure from an agent perspective, you would agree, or maybe not, that the clock starts before a victim is identified. You know, I remember my trafficking situation was in Newark, New Jersey, and in courtroom, they showed us a video of they've been investigating, and then we saw ourselves little and we were aging. But the agent that was in that video, his name is Joe, and I work with Joe now. Love Joe. He's been doing this, he's retired now. But one thing he said was before they got to us, they had a social worker, they had a team of people that were going to carry out the rescue, they call it. They had a social worker. They had a board for us to identify who is from what, to have a language support. They had the states that we could go to help. So this is Newark, New Jersey. Then once we were identified, they determined, okay, this subset of you are going to this state. This subset of you are going here, based on your ages and whatnot. And so I didn't realize this until years later, talking to Joe, that their clock started when we were identified. It wasn't at the date that they were going to do the rescue, it was before we were identified. They had to call the states to say, okay, Michigan can take 4, Minnesota can take 2, Iowa can take 1, based on the services that were available. So diversifying your outreach of interagency collaboration, multidisciplinary collaboration, what is in the best interest of this person that is going to be receiving the services? Is it in your state or is it not? So that's how I got to Michigan, is because Michigan at the time was the state that I can enter foster care from as a foreign national. And so that was the state that was identified to provide the best care based on the resources. Maybe the resources in this state are strained, where you cannot take that person home, but everybody's saying they're too old. And so, there are so many systemic tensions that undermines processes for the best viable option for people. We talk a lot about systems, and people make these rules. People can change these rules. Systems don't work themselves, just like computers don't work themselves. It is we that work those systems. So it's important that when we talk about system, we identify who is responsible for what, and what can we do to make sure that we don't use systems as an excuse as to why we can't get things done. And so collaboration is important, again, for many reasons, but for the simple fact that, if we don't collaborate, nothing gets done. For us that, because they collaborated, some people who went to Michigan, some people who stayed in Jersey, listen to this. There were 22 of us. We were all children. The subset of us, it was 7 that were identified to go to Michigan. Our outcomes are completely different than the rest that stay in Jersey. And I think it's largely due to agencies and the people who work at those agencies. The rest, out of that 22 number, the 7 of us who went to Michigan, we are all doing okay. Because we had a community of support. They say, okay, these group of people are coming. This will go to foster care. Churches will take this. Agencies will do this, There are people that are collaborating, and when they run out of resources, they pass us to the next group. And it was almost like you're pushing somebody up, and the next person is taking on. And then in New Jersey, once the first set of services was over for those girls and the boy, that was it. That's all they received. Some of them are in prison now. Some of them, we don't know. Some of them are struggling with mental health. And so it's important to say that it's people who start the system. It's people that's going to change this. So system don't have a face. It has a name, but it doesn't have face. It's people that work in this. So we have to open the box to say, you work here. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. There has to be an answer. A no is not an answer in these situations.
Wow, I feel like we could end the panel on that note. Thank you. So we're going to have another question coming right back to you, Bella and Ronnie. We're going to go to our question number 3 in the interest of time here. So what should be the role of subject matter experts in the field when you are responding to labor trafficking or developing response protocols? What can that role look like? So, do either one of you want to start?
All right, I think our role, and is based on all the work that we've been doing in the movement for so many years, is really important. So that we bring all the from first-hand experience. We bring our experience, or we also bring the work that we have doing with another victims and survivors of human trafficking. So we have a lot to actually create those protocols and make sure that the principles are being followed properly. And so our role is to keep pushing, but also to show that, as we said before, collaboration is the key. That we can do anything by ourselves. We need everybody's cooperation in that. And as long that we let people know, like the government know, the agencies know, the community know, hey, we're not alone in this. We need people to get involved more. So that will be our role as leaders in this movement, just to bring people together and get the unity that we need to fight human trafficking. Because if we are separated, we are divided, we won't be able to do anything.
Thank you, Honorable Ronnie. The role of survivors as a subject matter expert is important, and for many reasons. If I go to Nigeria and I want to get to a specific village and I don't speak Yoruba, I'll have to find somebody who speaks that language, who have walked that road to guide me to where I'm trying to go. It's the same thing here in the trafficking movement. if you want to solve something, you have to work with people who have experienced that so that they can develop. We provided input to the protocol here. The protocol here, as Honorable Browning. You're holding it up. You know, we provided input because we know that to eradicate human trafficking, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking, you can't do, no one discipline can do it alone, no one government can do it alone. We need to collaborate. And who better to collaborate with people who know from a first-hand perspective. Same likewise, there are some industry, and Agent Babijo can speak to this, where criminals help support investigation because they can think how criminals think. Same thing. We know how the crime was committed from a back end. We know how we were recruited. How traffickers not only groomed victims, they groom a whole family. They groom a whole society. They are very creative people. I wish they'd do something better with their creativity for humanity. But not only that, but we need to think that in order for us to walk a journey that we've never really walked or understand from a different perspective, we have to work with people who have experienced it. And also, survivors, I mean, we mentioned earlier, Honorable Ronnie is a businessman. He's not just a survivor, he's a businessman. There's so many places that we can borrow from to influence protocols and policies. And so it's so important to keep engaging people, not just in labor trafficking, but any industry who have experience that you don't have, to better inform your processes.
Pretty quick, before I forget, I'm sorry that I'm just touching your stuff here. But this is really good. It has all the great information you can find in here about human trafficking, labor trafficking. I mean, all the definitions, signs. I mean, I read this. This is amazing. It was a great work done.
And we will be sending out the link to the protocol as well as a number of other resources after the event.
I just want to add one more thing. Sometimes survivors also know what services are available to other survivors. There has been times where, you know, I will say, hey, I need this, and then two people will say, oh, hey, this is what I received in this state. So survivor, as subject matter, they are one of the most resourceful people that I know because they either have received it themselves, they know somebody who received it, or they've been a part of a working organization that helped created it. So they have like a boutique to go to resources. So it's not just tell your story or be on a panel and tell us things, but also like what organizations have you worked with? What resources do you have? What resources do you know? How do we collaborate with you to make sure that the next person get what they need?
Yeah, and find the right resources because she was saying, and I'm sorry to take the time for that, but it's important. No, it's important that we know, you know, what resources are available. Even though it's not in your state, but what happened to Bella happening to me in my case too. When my case happened, there was no resources for victims of human trafficking, and I had to get resources from New Orleans, and they had the resources available for me. So I mean, we get connected to one another, but between survivors also, we know so many. We have so many connections, and we can help a lot as well. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay, so one more question here. This one is going to be specifically for Babijo and Caroline to expand a little bit on what you said at the beginning here. This is kind of the how-to. So the question is how you collaborate matters and response protocols can help in defining the scope of collaboration as we talked about earlier ahead of time. So can you just be a little bit more specific in terms of how protocols help guide our collaborative response to labor trafficking and what it looks like to create one? So we heard some about the reason for it, but maybe a little bit more about how to create a protocol.
Thank you, Sarah. So this protocol development was definitely not an easy task. It was a 3-year project. We're in the last of the 3 years, but it was very important. to all of us involved. And the most important part about this collaboration was what they've already referred to. And I do need to do a shout out to Bukola and the Enitan Story. And I saw that Terry Flaherty was online as well. Those two phenomenal leaders led survivorship groups. And that's who I learned from. And that's who our group learned from. So we could move forward and create something that Ronnie keeps touching and taking from me because he likes it so much. Because of their leadership, this was produced. Had it not been for them, we wouldn't have a product like this. So thank you, first of all, to both of them. And that really is what is important when you're developing protocol, finding the right people to bring to the table. We had struggled, not with Bukola and Terry because they're phenomenal, they were easy choices, right? But then we had to go to all the other collaborative systems that we needed, like the medical profession, the law enforcement officers, outside of our task force, you know, who was investigating human trafficking? Patrol officers, what do they know about human trafficking? Attorneys, our civil groups, Minnesota Department of Health and Safe Harbor, and Department of Labor. The Attorney General's office, who had a wage theft group, but nobody was working together on this. So finding those right people to bring to the table. We got them to the table. And then everyone's sitting there going, by the way, why are we here? What is labor trafficking? So then I went, oh, okay, now we need to educate this group. And we brought some phenomenal presenters in, nationally and locally. And we educated our group. And then we had to bring that entire group who has very different perspectives and understandings and beliefs and roles. We had to bring them all together to agree on what this protocol should be. That probably was the most challenging part. We had people on the protocol group that thought that this should be 150 pages. Exactly, thank you. I didn't say it. And then from the law enforcement perspective, which was right, and I will advocate for that for the day I retire. Law enforcement needed something short, concise, especially now with resources so depleted. All they're doing is triaging and trying to get through the day, right? If I would have given them a 150-page document, it would have went in the trash or on the shelf and been a dust collector. What they needed was a one-page document, which we created, that they can easily look at and go, yep, nope, this is who I call. So also knowing the group that you're producing the protocol for and knowing what they need and what's going to work. I was just telling Caroline, I can't remember how many of these I ordered. This is the one page that goes to patrol officers. This is my last pack. Because the last part of our protocol development was the implementation stage, and that's where we're at now. And that's where myself, Bukola, Bella, and other partners, advocates for human rights, the AG's office, Minnesota Department of Labor, we're traveling around the state and we're educating the law enforcement officers in Minnesota. As many people that we can bring to the table, and I don't care if it's one person that I educate on that day, that's one more person than we had yesterday. The protocol development is something that we all did as an extra collaborative duty, and I will tell you that I would do it all over again, even though I'm currently working 2 full-time jobs. So, as hard as it was, it by far was worth it, and we just hope that we're making a difference in Minnesota.
That was our, do you have just something quick to add?
Yeah, I would just add, and I think Bobby Jo summed it up really well. It's rewarding, it's messy. You have to find compromise, and you have to be patient, because protocol development and coming together is a 3-year process. If you really want to do it well, even just doing that one pager, that is a lot of work to get that all onto one page. In some ways, that's harder than 150 pages, because what really matters to this group of people is what gets onto that one page. So, I mean, from our perspective in Safe Harbor, we've worked with protocol teams around the state, primarily on sex trafficking, sexual exploitation. We hope to see this expand more on labor trafficking too. It makes a big difference in communities where people can come together and work and figure out where everybody stands, where everybody's ready to go, like you all were saying, before anything even happens. So they are staged and ready. And after this 3-year process, we have a law enforcement piece that is staged and ready for when a case comes up. When somebody does remember, they have that in their packet or in their drawer or in their squad car, whatever. Oh yeah, this looks like a labor trafficking case. Now I've got this, and now I know what to do. So it's so crucial to go through that process.
So are there any questions? We are a little bit short on time, but we could take a couple, and I see one that we're going to start with. That is here online, and then we could take one in the room too. Let me get Terry's here online. And Terry's question, what are some of your suggestions? This got posted during your answers, Bella and Ronnie, to the second question. What are some of your suggestions on how to encourage, respect, and empower other survivors, maybe in this work, in this process of engaging? And Andrea will come to you.
You got the mic first. What are some of your suggestions on how to encourage, respect, and empower other survivors? I would say survivors are no different than a regular person. We all want to be treated with respect, dignity, love, kindness, regard. And so, survivors are not an exclusive group that requires this special treatment. You just treat another survivors how you see them treating themselves sometimes. I tell people, don't treat me how you treat yourself, because I don't know how you treat yourself. You might treat yourself badly. Treat me how you see me treating myself, with kindness, respect, love, and etc. Don't pity people. Survivors don't need your pity. They need your continuous advocacy. They need your choices and the ways that you advocate to reflect what you believe in. If you believe that there should be no exploitation, your actions should reflect that in your day job or not, and just in your community. So I would say advocacy, and then recognize that survivors are not a special group. Don't be impatient and overly critical of people. That includes survivors of trafficking or not. Just people, just regard to people as people.
I would say, congratulations to one another, because to get to this point is hard, it's a lot of work, and we can discourage, all we have been doing in different capacity, just to cheer up one another, I would say, and just think that the work that has been done is not in vain, and there is much more that we can do, and the only way is we can do that if we are together. So,
I was going to also add that I see it on other industries where survivors are preferred based on your educational status. If you're young or old, depending on the type of trafficking, let's not do that. We, hear from people, even if it's people you often don't hear from. Hear from people from Native communities. Hear from diverse group of people, not just in race, but in characteristics. Hear from single parents who are traffickers. Hear from older adults who are traffickers. Hear from people with disabilities. There is a characteristics of certain personality types in the trafficking movement, because of their grant applications and what they need to do, they will select a specific group of traffickers because they speak to their mission. Let's not do that. That's selective empathy. Either you have empathy or no at all. Don't have selective empathy.
And that's the reason why it's so difficult to create those protocols, because you need to bring to the table, every actor. But the thing is, just to bring the right people to the table to agree, as they said, on this issue, like something that might, Bella say, bring people from different edges. And there are something that apply for me, maybe doesn't apply for you, but we are together and we discuss, okay, if we make that decision that will affect you, I'm here, I want to let that affect me, so this is the way that we should do it. And we get aligned and with a common goal, because we just want to have a world free of slavery.
We got something happening here with the bell. Okay, we're going to come to Andrea here for another question.
Thank you all so much. My question for all of you is, for all of us in the audience, both here in person and online, how do we start this? Where do we land for those resources? How do we start these conversations? Any sort of advice you'd give to us for this call of action? I'd love to hear from each of your perspectives.
Great, thank you. Okay. Should we stand by now?
No, with me. I believe, and I applaud when people are so humble to understand that I don't know much, and be open to learn from others. Listening, all being said about listening. But be humble enough to say, I don't know, I want to learn from you so that you can learn from me as well. So I think that's the key in this case.
Can I borrow Agent Bobby Joe's one-pager thing? No, just sorry. Thank you for that question. This is a law enforcement patrol response. So if you're in law enforcement, the first thing is what is labor trafficking, indicators of labor trafficking, situation-specific indicators, initial response protocol. There's just like a to-go-to here. What industry do you work in?
I'm a Safe Harbor regional navigator, so I help coordinate the response in 11 county region.
Right. So if there is, in your job, if there is a coordination, something that's missing, or something that you've already created that isn't working, how do you improve that? If not, what other industries can you borrow from? We don't always have to reinvent the wheel. I'm big for that. If something is working somewhere, it could work here, or you can fix it to work for you. So how do we start? I don't know. You have to figure that out, but I think that you have the ability to figure that out in your specific agency and department.
So my belief is a little bit different than what these fine people have just said. My belief is you leave here and you don't stop talking about it. You stand on top of the table, you shout as loud as you can, you gather everybody that will listen, and you pay this forward. Whatever you have learned and whatever you can take away from today, you can take these and hand them to every single law enforcement officer down there so that they at least have this in their cars and start providing the education to them. We need to spread this word across the state of Minnesota, and we cannot give up. We cannot take no.
And I guess I would just piggyback on that by saying, remind people that Safe Harbor started somewhere too. And 10 plus years ago, people didn't really think sex trafficking was that big of an issue, or it didn't happen in their communities. It was a city's thing, it was an international thing. And now look where it is, and the same thing needs to happen. Labor trafficking was left behind at that point, and we have to catch up. And so if somebody's skeptical, just say, look at this system over here, look what we did, look at our response, look what we're doing in the state for this. We need to be doing it over here too.
And if people need examples in your area of what's happening right underneath their nose, I can come and provide some examples. And they probably don't want to hear what I have to say.
Awesome. Well, we are actually at time right now. I want to thank each of you very, very much for all the insights that you shared. Thank you. right, and I'm going to hand it back over. We will send out, like I mentioned, some links to the resources mentioned today.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause for our panelists and moderator. Great job. I don't know about you, but if I could say one word that I came away with from this panel, it'll be hope. I feel like there's hope. There's some things that are being done. We've made some progress in the last year, 10 years at least. There's more that's being done, and there's more to be done. So I feel very hopeful, and I hope you did too, from what you just heard. So thanks, everyone. Now we will have recommendations from the Bush Grant, from the Bush Grant report, and that will be done by Peter Gentoli with the Enitan Story. Okay, just before we actually start the recommendations, we do have a couple of certificates to award. I want to do that right away before we get to the recording. So. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the certificates are for those people who were on the work group doing this work for 3 years with us. And we just want to appreciate them because we couldn't have gotten here without them. So thank you so much. This one is for Honorable Bella because I know the right is already.
I had to catch a flight to DC, you guys. Thank you.
Caroline, Mama. Oh, okay. Sarah Light. Sarah's here. DJ Bobby Joe. Thanks so much for you. Thank you. Honorable Ronnie.
You want to?
Well, thank you so much.
Honorable Harold D'Souza, I think he's online. Yeah. Honorable Evelyn, she's not here. Honorable Flor Molina, she's not here. Honorable Phoenix Ipenga, Honorable Imam Matu, she's not here. Hello, Marie Brenda.
This woman, she has no idea what she means to me. She has no clue that, like, every morning when I wake up, next to my Bible sits her books next to a picture of my grandmother. So I just want to say that we are so blessed. You are a change maker, and I love you. And this is not just from us. There's a card from everybody in there. So sounds good. And yes. Oh, can we get a picture? Can someone get a picture of us? Did anybody get hugging, you know? We look like we like each other.
I think this song is later. Please check your certificate. Okay. Atina Faith Online. Deborah McCormick, she's not here. Jonathan Mona, he's not here. Dr. Tolulope Ola, she's not here. Rachel, call her.
She has to be.
Okay, she's not here. Lori Ann Dancing, she's not here. Sunu Shrestha, I don't know if she's still here, she was online. Sarah Floman, she's not here. Steve Dubroboli. Okay, Alisa Santusi. I think she was online. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. I will take the recommendation.
He needs a microphone to speak. Can you give it to him and come to me?
Maybe they want me to hold. Oh, thank you so much. So my name is Peter Mtuli. I'm an international fellow and a cop in my own country, working in criminal investigation division. I've been a cop for the past 23 years. I thought I have more years than Bobby Joe, but oh my God. So she has been a good mentor for me when I came here. So I want to take this opportunity anyway to thank all organizations that were able to extend their hand to help me through in this new crime in the country. The BCA was very central. The MPH director, Greg Palmer, admitted today the Enitan Story. And the Enitan Story is also my story because, I mean, it's a painful fact, but a fact that in the law enforcement, we are really not experienced in terms of victim handling. So I'm a novice in this, in that I'm charged to do. I'm pretty much going to fill very big shoes. After very good people came before me. So I'll proceed with the recommendations in the process. So it is our recommendation. Our first so the recommendations are stratified. I'll read recommendations from legislation, state agencies, non-profit organizations, community members, business, law enforcement, and of course people with lived experiences. I'll try to be very fast. Our first recommendation is to legislators that we recommend funding to provide comprehensive services to individuals who are experiencing labor trafficking. We also recommend improvement on the laws. We are advocating for victim-centric laws that protect victims, and at the same time create an avenue for prosecution of offenders. Then I'll proceed to state agencies. Some of them are really so good that I'll read outright. We recommend that state agencies access federal funds to provide services in the form of grants for non-profit and then the local governments to identify and serve individuals experiencing labor trafficking. We then recommend that state agencies increase capacity to implement programs and services that meet the needs of individuals experiencing labor trafficking by engaging the voices of the survivors and subject matter experts. And now to non-profit organizations. we recommend that non-profit organizations tailor their funding opportunities in line with the individuals who are experiencing labor trafficking. We cannot recommend that they train their staff or put them through professional development so that they can recognize and serve individuals who have experienced labor trafficking. Our community members, we recommend that community members in their education in trafficking, they also include labor trafficking. We better recommend that the community members participate in opportunities both for training and volunteering. Volunteering with organizations that provide services to identify individuals who have experienced labor trafficking. And for business, we have a few that the small, medium, and large-scale enterprises should take the onus to train their employees to identify labor trafficking, so that they don't find themselves bordering in the violation of the provisions of the law. We thus recommend that the businesses review their supply chain policies to ensure that they don't encourage or promote labor trafficking. Now to law enforcement. We recommend that the law enforcement, as they are dealing with sex trafficking, they also identify labor trafficking. It is our view that the resources and time should be devoted towards the training of the law enforcement, so that they pretty much move from what we call awareness into more robust investigations. We recommend that investigations are victim-centric, so that the victims are exposed to a conducive, user-friendly, and peaceable environment. And we then recommend that the wage theft investigators or labor violation investigations should also include identifying potential labor trafficking during investigations. And this leads me to my very last slide. There's a good adage that says experience is the best teacher, and I've seen it here. We recommend that people who live the experience, who would like to use their expertise to inform the work, take the time to consider the pros and cons of using the lived experience to work and decide how best to engage their services in the anti-trafficking movement. We then recommend that people with lived experience who may be new participate in professional development opportunities to help build individual skills to inform their work. And lastly, we recommend that those who are still actively being trafficked for labor reach out for help. And then this concludes my short presentation on recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Time is well spent. Thank you so much for coming out today, for spending time with us. We want to thank all of our virtual audience, all of those who were with us online. Thanks for being with us, for attending, and for engaging with us today. We do have one last goodie bag giveaway to the online audience. We asked them to put their name on the Jamboard who were interested in a drawing, and we did get about 6 people do that, so we're going to do a drawing. And we'll actually give it to all 6 of them, and that's Cameron Zwart, Katrina Goldbergson, Mel Ivar, Nama Khan, Jared Daniels, and Becky Diffin. So all of you are back with us. And again, thanks everyone for coming to our 10th anniversary and also our and also this report of the grant from the Bush Foundation. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Oh, before you leave, when you're in the room, the Human Trafficking Convening poster over there has a QR code on it. That's actually the survey for today. So if you want to just scan it and then take the survey, that would be great. For those online, we'll send a link. We'll put a link in there, and you can complete the satisfaction survey. Please give us your feedback so that we can make any improvements for next time. Bukola, any last words? We have the short. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much, everyone. I would just like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you. And please, for those who need it for continuing educational credit, for those in the room, you can scan the QR code to get it. And those online, we will share the link and we'll also email the link to you for continuing education credit. Once again, thank you so much.